Chapter 391. Amethyst Fish Palace, 13. Whose family did this little rotten child belong to? Quickly lead it home. He really was too embarrassing. Su Luo speechlessly turned her head away. The Jade Lake's fairy was so furious that she nearly went insane. She wasn't the only person here, even though the surroundings were sparse and full of space, but the number of people was not few. Furthermore, most of these people were men. This way, under thousands of pairs of staring eyes, her always exceedingly refined image of an icy heart and clean as jade was immediately ruined with not a bit left by this lecherous puppy. Now, the Jade Lake's fairy was itching to tear the little divine dragon into pieces. "I want to kill you." The Jade Lake's fairy was in a towering rage. Unable to suppress the wrath in her chest anymore, she angrily pulled out her double-edged sword. Able to stir up the Jade Lake's fairy into a violent rage, the little divine dragon could also be considered the one and only. The little divine dragon, seeing the Jade Lake's fairy come over with a murderous expression, he instinctively felt a respectable dose of fear. Immediately, with whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sounds, he turned around and started to just run. His speed was so fast, it was inconceivable. The Jade Lake's fairy's hair was messy, her clothing was disheveled, and she carried a sword, chasing after him. Now, she was so unkempt and ragged that she couldn't even be compared to a beggar. Wherefore was she still that Jade Lake's fairy that was above the common people? Several of the surrounding men were dumbstruck as they watched the goddess in their mind being trampled on by a puppy. Then, she was unable to restrain her anger and pulled out her sword, chasing to kill it. Their hearts were all shocked incessantly. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what would be good to say. The Jade Lake's fairy was at the apex of the 5th rank in cultivation. With regards to strength, hers was higher than the little divine dragon's by a lot. The little divine dragon merely relied on his speed being fast. If they were really to fight each other, he completely lacked the ability to succeed. The little divine dragon was also not stupid. He turned around and ran towards Su Luo's side. It might have been due to his instinct of self-preservation, but he didn't even look at Su Luo and directly jumped up. His very small body immediately curled up and rolled into Nangong Liuyun's spacious sleeves. In a flash, all traces of him were hidden. The Jade Lake's fairy rushed over with her sword drawn. With her own eyes, she saw that hateful puppy hide away in Nangong Liuyun's sleeves. Now, she had completely forgotten about her current wretched, ragged appearance with messy hair and disheveled clothing. Panting in rage, she said to Nangong Liyun, "Third senior brother, I ask you to definitely return that little thing to me. Today, if I don't kill it, it would be difficult for me to eliminate this hatred in my heart." Her finger was just in that way. Had a chunk been bitten off, how could the Jade Lake's fairy, who was widely known as always perfect, endure it? Nangong Liuyun's face had a perplexed expression. His voice was clear and cold. "What little thing? Why is it that this king hadn't caught sight of anything?" Saying this, he put both of his hands behind his back, with both eyes raised and an innocent expression on his face. Once the Jade Lake's fairy heard these words, immediately, she felt extremely aggrieved. "Third senior brother, how could you be so heartless? You look at my finger. My finger was forcibly bitten off by that puppy. That puppy is obviously within your sleeves. I saw it with my own eyes. Could it be that you will still harbor it? Could it be that in your mind, I can't even be compared to a dog?" The Jade Lake's fairy's eyes carried tears, crying like raindrops on pear blossoms. She looked lovely and pitiful, extremely distressed. Nangong Liyun frowned. With an indifferent tone, he said, "This king truly didn't see that puppy you were talking about. If you don't believe me, come have a look for yourself." Saying this, Nangong Liyun very openly and above board rolled up his sleeves and also very kindly shook his sleeves. He then cast a glance at her. "Look at it clearly. Nothing is in here, and especially not the puppy you are talking about. How could it be like this?" Plainly, her gaze had all along been watching in all directions. That puppy simply hadn't fled from his back. The Jade Lake's fairy's sight shifted to Su Luo's body. Su Luo also openly laid out her hands. "My clothing, however, has narrow sleeves. Even if I wanted to conceal it, I couldn't." Chapter 392, Amethyst Fish Palace, 14. The Jade Lake's fairy's wrathful gaze shot towards Su Luo, furiously saying, "That puppy is your spirit pet. What are you prepared to do?" Su Luo very artlessly spread out her hand. "What spirit pet? What happened? Why is it that I don't know about it?" To capture a thief, you need the spoils, and must also be caught in the act, with both thief and evidence. Her little divine dragon had slipped away faster than a thief and wasn't captured on the spot. Naturally, she must deny it till the end. Su Luo didn't bear the slightest mental burden because her conscience was clear. The Jade Lake's fairy said in a towering rage, "You are simply shameless." Su Luo very irritatedly snorted. "The shameless one should be you, right? You keep saying that the fault lies in my spirit pet. If you have the ability, then take out some evidence." Whoever suggested it, then they needed to provide the evidence. Before, her little divine dragon was indeed hiding within Nangong Liuyun's sleeves, but later, when Nangong Liuyun crossed both hands behind his back, she seized this opportunity to collect the little divine dragon into her space. No matter how the Jade Lake's fairy searched, she wouldn't be able to find it. The Jade Lake's fairy didn't expect that Su Luo would be so contrary. She once again cried for help by casting her gaze towards Nangong Liuyun. What made her disappointed to the point of despair was that her third senior brother's gaze unblinkingly watched that little slut, as if the surrounding people, including her, were all transparent and did not exist. "Good, very good. Su Luo, you remember this for me?" The Jade Lake's fairy covered her finger that was drenched in blood, with a malevolent appearance and vicious rays of light flashing through her eyes. "If you have the ability, then hide that spirit pet well, otherwise humph." Finished speaking, the Jade Lake's fairy flung her sleeves and left. Nangong Liuyun heaved a sigh and looked at the retreating back of the Jade Lake's fairy. "From now on, be a little more careful of things." Su Luo also used the same regretful gaze to look at the back of the Jade Lake's fairy. Slowly, she shook her head and sighed. Alas, she brushed past a good treasure like this. Presumably, if she knew the truth, she would be infuriated to death, right? Finished speaking, she raised her eyes and looked at Nangong Liuyun. Nangong Liuyun smiled while rubbing her head. "Let's go." Saying this, he led Su Luo by the hand and both of them stood fixed in front of the door to Stone Room 123, then pushed the blue-colored button on the door. Immediately, under their feet appeared a white halo that enveloped their entire body. When they opened their eyes again, the surroundings had already changed to a new environment. Very clearly, they had already entered into the Stone Room 123. Opening her eyes, Su Luo squinted slightly because she was assaulted by intense rays of light. All around was the brilliant light reflected from the arcane ice iron, with a radiance that dazzled the eyes. It was able to clearly send out an inverted image of their silhouette. Now, hiding inside Su Luo's spaces, the little divine dragon's body stood upright. Two little paws reached up on the wall in her space, continuously slapping it. His little face was anxious to the extreme, wishing he could just immediately dash out. Su Luo helplessly smiled. Within the time for one thought, the little divine dragon had already appeared on the empty ground in front of her. The little divine dragon threw off the feeling of vertigo in his head, and when he saw the surrounding environment, his two eyes shined instantly. He immediately dashed towards the stone altar up ahead. This stone room was approximately about 100 square meters in area. All around was empty. Only on the stone altar up ahead, there seemed to have something laid out. Nangong Liuyun and Su Luo followed behind the little divine dragon and walked quickly towards the stone altar, full of curiosity. The stone altar, it was more accurate to say that it was a jade altar. The jade altar was about the size of a ping-pong table and was carved from top-notch white jade. The surface of the jade was bright, clean, and exquisite. It was so clear that it was able to reflect a person's image. On top of the jade altar, calmly swimming for a long time, was a palm-sized, purple-colored goldfish. Also, in front of her, was a dark green, sea-colored bowl. Under this comparison of the two, the purple-colored goldfish seemed even more pitifully small. Chapter 393, Amethyst Fish Palace, 15. This dark green sea-colored bowl had now actually been filled with chunks after chunks of crystal stones. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan. Unexpectedly, every color was there. Also, the sea-colored bowl was packed to the brim. Su Luo couldn't help but inhale a breath of cold air when she saw this. These crystal stones infused with radiant rainbow colors. There was no lack of green-colored and cyan-colored crystal stones inside. How precious were these crystal stones outside? Recall how she had painstakingly gambled on stones and struggled to earn only a little more than 10 pieces of crystal stones at most. Su Luo fixedly stared at that sea-colored bowl, unblinkingly looking at the various kinds of crystal stones within that sea-colored bowl. Weren't there about several hundred pieces of crystal stones in here? If she were to take it outside, then it would cause a huge sensation. Su Luo was now somewhat stupefied, just like a destitute, frustrated beggar that all of a sudden saw a room full of golden bricks appear in front of her. Moreover, it was still something in a state she could easily make use of. How could you ask a person not to be so excited? Su Luo's gaze then landed on the purple goldfish. This tiny palm-sized little thing. Wasn't what she thought it was, right? Amethyst crystal fish? Nangong Liuyun's complexion changed slightly and uttered in surprise. The amethyst crystal fish that countless number of people yearned for even in their dreams, just this abruptly and without any warning, appeared. Su Luo couldn't help but inhale a breath of cold air. Just now, she merely took a very small guess. She didn't expect it was the real amethyst crystal fish. Just at this time, the amethyst crystal fish suddenly opened up its mouth. Immediately, a cyan-colored crystal stone was spit out of its mouth. It quietly shot towards that sea-colored bowl. However, that sea-colored bowl was obviously filled to the brim with crystal stones and was already unable to hold this piece. It was an event that occurred which made Su Luo surprised and also extremely regretful. One could only see that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone being launched to the top of that pile of crystal stones in the sea-colored bowl. However, due to gravity and inertia acting on it, this cyan-colored crystal stone actually slid down from within the sea-colored bow, landing on top of the jade altar. One could only see and hear a thump sound as that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone landed on top of the jade altar. Then right afterwards, with the speed exceeding that of the naked eye, it disappeared without a trace. How could it be like this? Su Luo was somewhat flabbergasted. That was not just a red-colored or orange-colored crystal stone. That was a cyan-colored crystal stone. Ah, Lord, it disappeared. Back then, the Lu family, for just one piece of cyan-colored crystal, dared to actually bring the fight to Prince Jin's royal manor, okay? From this, it could be seen how rare a cyan-colored crystal stone was. On this continent, again, how precious it was. But now, Su Luo helplessly looked on as a cyan-colored crystal stone vanished in front of her eyes. Obviously, it was easily obtainable, but this kind of feeling of having let it slip away was the most oppressive to the heart. In the end, what just happened? Where is the cyan-colored crystal stone? Where did it run to? Su Luo very unhappily leaned forward onto the jade altar, meticulously and carefully searching for it. However, where could she even find a trace of the cyan-colored crystal stone? It should have been swallowed by the jade altar. Nangong Luyun observed it for a while and arrived at a conclusion. This jade altar can also swallow it? Su Luo was simply incredulous. Could it be that the jade altar also had the intelligence of a spirit? Nangong Luyun nodded his head. In this world, all living things engender and subdue each other. This amethyst crystal fish can spit out crystal stones from its mouth, really defying the natural order of things too much. According to the laws of the world, it would be correct to say that there must be some restrictions eventually. After a pause, Nangong Luyun continued to say, Amethyst crystal fish can spit out 3 pieces of crystal stones in one day, every grade of crystal stone appearing in random order. Spitting it out for 100 years, then how astonishing would the amount of crystal stones be? As long as it appears in the world, it absolutely would cause the unrest of the entire continent. Therefore, it must be limited, which ought to be that any which exceeded what the sea-colored bowl could hold would be swallowed up by the jade altar. Also, it could be interpreted as automatically taking it back for the amethyst crystal fish, because this jade altar is linked together with the amethyst crystal fish, resulting in an irresolvable situation. Chapter 394, Amethyst Fish Palace, 16. Having heard what was said, Su Luo swiftly grabbed a sack from her space and was just about to stuff all the crystal stones in the sea-colored bowl and take it back. But just at this moment, suddenly, the little divine dragon leaned in closer. With his two little paws, he easily grabbed a handful of crystal stones and lifted it towards his own mouth. Just when Su Luo was distractedly staring at this dumbfoundedly, the little divine dragon once again rapidly grabbed another handful of crystal stones and stuffed it into his own mouth. After being grabbed twice by his paws, that huge, sea-colored bowl now had only 1/3 of the original crystal tones left over. However, without waiting for Su Luo to react, the little divine dragon, being a glutton, had swallowed an excessive amount of crystal stones. His two plump and huge eyes were in a state that looked like the hypnosis spiral. His little brain was dizzy, with his little body swaying back and forth as if drunk. Finally, his little body curved towards the ground and immediately, he lost consciousness. Su Luo was really very angry, and at the same time, she also found it ridiculously funny. Why did this little thing eat so urgently? It wasn't like she wouldn't raise him. After Nangong Luyun examined him, he immediately smiled. Rest assured, nothing is wrong with him. It should be because he swallowed an excessive amount of crystal stones and automatically entered the unconscious state to cultivate. Wait until he wakes up, then his strength ought to have changed somewhat. I hope it will be so. Su Luo picked up the little divine dragon, who seemed to be in a drunken state, from the ground, and then put him away into her space. Relying on the little divine dragon's fortune, they finally found the amethyst crystal fish. Su Luo's mood seemed to be very cheerful. Before, the Jade Lake's fairy had dithered for a long time in front of the doorway to this stone room. Just when she was about to enter, she was toyed with by the little divine dragon until she was bedraggled and exhausted. Last time, it was the same with Lu Chengfeng. That piece of source stone he was about to cut was fancied by the little divine dragon. He couldn't win in a fight, so he had directly urinated on top of that stone and made Lu Chengfeng disgusted enough to walk away. If the Jade Lake's fairy knew that she lost the amethyst crystal fish because of the little divine dragon's interruption, don't know if her intestines would be green from regret. Really want to see her appearance of being regretful until becoming frantic. However, able to steal the amethyst crystal fish from the Jade Lake's fairy's hand, this kind of feeling was truly invigorating. Su Luo, while thinking this, also pressed her hands on top of the jade altar and straightforwardly collected the entire jade altar with the amethyst crystal fish into her space. Her space, through the process of having that sea-colored bowl full of all kinds of crystal stones, once again increased countless times in size. Now, the inside of her space was huge. She completely did not need to worry about the issue of storage space. However, Su Luo felt somewhat guilty. Nangong Luyun had accompanied her for the whole journey, yet the two treasures they found along the way were both given to her. Nangong Luyun hadn't reaped any rewards. This made Su Luo feel somewhat apologetic. In her heart, she secretly resolved that she must look for an opportunity to find a useful treasure for Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun, who was being stared at by Su Luo until his heart became somewhat scared, stroked her head and said, "Your eyes are whirling and spinning around. What sly idea are you planning again right now?" Su Luo smilingly said, "It's a secret." Exiting out of the stone room, both of them walked around with a saunter. As before, they were leisurely and in a carefree manner, strolling along as if touring the street. Walking past a dark corridor, the sounds of people talking could be heard from up ahead. From the sound of voices, it seemed that there were quite a few people ahead. Su Luo and Nangong Luyun exchanged a glance. Both of them increased their speed and walked ahead. Up ahead stood a circle of people forming a dense mass. Bai Chening, Lan Xian, An Yeming, not a single one was missing as they stood on one side. On the other side, the Crown Prince, Liao Yin, and the Jade Lake's Fairy was also present. Seeing Nangong Luyun coming over, an vexed expression passed over Bai Qinying's eyes. With a frown, he said, "We are done for, do you know? The amethyst crystal fish was actually obtained by Nangong Liujuan and them." Nangong Luyun and Su Luo exchanged a meaningful glance, both of them looking at each other in dismay. The amethyst crystal fish was definitely inside Su Luo's space. How could there be another one in the crown prince's hand? Now, the crown prince arrogantly walked towards Su Luo. Chapter 395, Amethyst Fish Palace, 17. Now, the crown prince's entire face was full of joy. He had an air of complacency and a smug appearance, as if he had obtained the number one treasured object under the heavens. He arrogantly lifted his eyebrows at Su Luo and coldly smiled. "Loathsome girl, you arrived too late. The amethyst crystal fish is already within this prince's hand." Ha 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 ha. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed slightly, smiling a smile that was not quite one. "Amethyst crystal fish? Where is it? Why is it that I didn't see it? Isn't it probably merely just something you said to yourself?" A sneer appeared in the depths of the crown prince's eyes. He held out the hand that was behind his back all along. In the center of that hand, shockingly, there actually was a purple-colored goldfish. Su Luo carefully looked at it. She discovered that this amethyst crystal fish, whether it was size or color, was almost exactly the same as the one she had. The only difference was that it lacked the sea-colored bowl in front of it, and also that flat, smooth as a mirror jade altar. Su Luo somewhat didn't understand. Could there actually be two amethyst crystal fish? Seeing Su Luo frown, the crown prince was even more insolently arrogant, and he burst into a hearty laugh. He pointed at Nangong Luyun and very smugly said, "Amethyst crystal fish is in my hands. Ha 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 ha. From now on, I will never lose to you. Not anymore." Nangong Luyun, that matchlessly handsome face was steeped in a wantonly nefarious smiling expression. His tone was low and dark. "Really? Such a nature-defying treasure as the amethyst crystal fish. Only one would appear every 100 years in the amethyst fish palace, and also, there was only one such fish, and that's it. Moreover, that fish was in his little Luo's hand." The crown prince thought that on Nangong Liuyun's face, he was pretending not to care. But his heart was envious to death. He laughed even more joyfully. "Nangong Luyun, Nangong Luyun, you are too self-confident. Too much belief in being infallible. Don't tell me you thought that with that kind of unhurried strolling along, you would be able to obtain the amethyst crystal fish? That all the treasured objects are just waiting for you to pick up? Now, you must be regretting it." Ha ha ha. Seldom would he win once against Nangong Luyun. The crown prince was happy to the extent of forgetting himself, so excited as to nearly go insane. Nangong Luyun truly pityingly watched his older brother in name only and faintly sighed. How could he have the heart to tell the crown prince that inside the amethyst fish palace there were fake amethyst crystal fishes? Moreover, the fake amethyst crystal fish could sigh. Su Luo saw the crown prince jeering at Nangong Luyun, and she didn't know why, but a trace of angry intent flashed through her heart protectively. Could be that she herself wasn't even aware of it, but she already considered Nangong Luyun to be her own people. Su Luo was determined not to let the crown prince have an easy time. Her strategy was very simple. It was to sow discord. Su Luo merely smiled faintly, pointed at that amethyst crystal fish, and said to the crown prince, "Really, congratulations to your highness the crown prince. The amethyst crystal fish is a great treasure." But Su Luo's gaze swept around in a circle, finally fixing her gaze on Li Outyin and the Jade Lake's fairies' bodies. She feigned distress and sighed out a sentence. "But there is only one amethyst crystal fish. The Li family pair of brother and sister put in a lot of effort and strength, right? How could this amethyst crystal fish be best split then?" The crown prince was slightly stumped for words. This amethyst crystal fish was one that he took out from within a stone room. Naturally, it belonged to him. How could it have even a hair of relationship to them in the Li family? However, the crown prince subconsciously looked towards Li Outyin. Seeing his pair of eyes, fixed on the amethyst crystal fish that shone with a burning radiance. Immediately, the crown prince's heart was apprehensive. His complexion continued to sink down directly, with an expression covered in haze. Su Luo lightly smiled and turned her face away. Nangong Luyun found it laughable and rubbed her head. Even though he did not mind Nangong Liujua's attitude, but this girl having the mind to stick out for him, this was sufficient proof that her heart already had him in its place. This discovery made him very happy. Chapter 396, Amethyst Fish Palace, 18. Her strategy was very simple, but also very effective. With just a brief sentence, she created a crack in the Crown Prince and Li Outyan's tentatively agreed-upon alliance. Having planted the seeds of doubt, the growing of roots, germination, then flourishing and maturity, were also merely a minute's affair. Nangong Luyun looked at this bright, elegant, and charming girl in front of him. He couldn't help but somewhat sigh. What's to be done? He was very fond, extremely fond of this girl. He simply liked her to the point of almost suffocating. He really wished he could tie her to his side, always keeping her close to him. At this moment, the atmosphere inside the main hall was a little strange. The Crown Prince was strutting around, self-satisfiedly and proudly showing off in front of Nangong Luyun. But Nangong Luyun didn't even glance at him. He was solely engrossed in gazing at Su Luo with loving, indulging, and tender affection. Jade Lake's fairy stared at Su Luo with hatred as well as envy, wishing her gaze could stab a hole into her face. But Su Luo merely composedly and easily tried to drive a wedge between the Crown Prince and Li Outyan, attempting to make them automatically collapse and fall apart. In this queer atmosphere, Bei Qining softly sighed, breaking this strange calm. There isn't much time left. Ahead is the most important test to pass. Will you guys go or not? Bei Qining glared at Nangong Luyun with a look of resentment for failing to meet his expectations and impatience to see some improvements. Up ahead was another test that was greatly related to the amethyst crystal fish, but now, the amethyst crystal fish was in the Crown Prince's hands. Should they take action to grab it? Bei Qining considered this while holding his chin. He cast a glance that harbored evil designs at the amethyst crystal fish in the Crown Prince's hands. The Crown Prince saw the look from Bei Qining and immediately returned to his senses from his elation. The people he took along was not many. In addition to Li Outyan and Li Yaoyao, these two temporarily allies. However, the Crown Prince had no choice but to admit that if Nangong Luyun insisted on forcibly taking it, then he was certain he couldn't safeguard the amethyst crystal fish. The Crown Prince coldly snorted towards Nangong Luyun. The dignified and majestic His Highness Prince Jin wouldn't degrade himself to robbing other people's treasure, right? The corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth hooked up into a ghost of a smile. He raised an eyebrow while looking towards that amethyst crystal fish. In his demonically charming pair of eyes flashed a cold-blooded expression. You really think that is a treasure? The Crown Prince's heart was startled. Then afterwards, he repeatedly laughed evilly. It said grapes are sour when you can't eat them. I didn't expect you, Nangong Luyun, to also only be like this. The implication was that Nangong Luyun couldn't obtain the amethyst crystal fish, therefore, he deliberately said that his amethyst crystal fish was a fake. Clearly, it was because Nangong Luyun was jealous of him. Nangong Luyun faintly smiled, declining to comment. Nangong Luyun's careless bearing that was light as a cloud and gentle as a breeze had thoroughly ignited the Crown Prince's fury, and he coldly snorted. If I can prove that it is the real amethyst crystal fish, what will you do? Want to bet again? Nangong Luyun's gaze that harbored evil designs sized up the Crown Prince from top to bottom, then sighed with a manner of taking pity on him. Still, it's better not to, right? You've already lost 1,500 pieces of green-colored crystal stones to my family's luower. To bully you once more will make us feel somewhat bad about it. Nangong Luyun was telling the truth, yet inevitably, there will be some people who hear the truth as an ironic remark, and the Crown Prince was exactly this kind of person. This sentence by Nangong Luyun completely stirred up the Crown Prince. One could only observe him coldly and solemnly, furiously shout, Nangong Luyun, You have bullied people intolerably. Good. I will bet with you. Since you just mentioned 1,500 green-colored crystal stones, then, if you lose, the debt of 1,500 green-colored crystal stones will be transferred to you. How about it?" Finished speaking this sentence, the Crown Prince immediately applauded his own fast response. Chapter 397, Amethyst Fish Palace, 19. Look at how clever he was, directly transferring those 1,500 green-colored crystal stones to Nangong Luyun, while he would be completely debt-free and light as a feather. As for if Nangong Luyun could afford the debt, that was not something he needed to consider. Now, everyone in the surrounding crowd was staring with their eyes opened wide, watching this circle of people in front of them in shock. They all knew that His Highness the Crown Prince had always been on bad terms with His Highness Prince Jean. However, they never confronted each other face to face. At this moment, the two of them were directly facing off. This kind of good play was normally hard to come by. Each and every person in the surrounding crowd stared at the two people full of excitement, all guessing at who would win. Reasoning told them that His Highness Prince Jean would never lose. Their eyes and the facts nevertheless informed them that within the Crown Prince's hand was the amethyst crystal fish, absolutely real and authentic. Then this bet, in the end, what direction would it head to? Everybody was extremely curious. Nangong Luyun cast an indifferent glance at Nangong Liujue. What if you lose? The Crown Prince choked immediately after. His complexion changed to a smug, complacent expression. The amethyst crystal fish was in his hands. How could he lose? If he didn't take huge advantage like a lion opening its mouth, he felt it would be a waste of natural resources, unworthy of this chance given to him by the heavens. The Crown Prince immediately gave several arrogant, cold snorts. "If I lose, I will compensate you an equal amount of 1,500 green-colored crystal stones." In other words, the two people's stakes were exactly 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. Nangong Luyun, who was always not interested in gambling stakes, this time, he hung his normal attitude and raised his eyebrow, smilingly saying, "Agreed?" "Nangong," Lan Xian uttered in surprise. Even though Nangong's insights were exceptional, however this time, could it be that the amethyst crystal fish in Nangong Liujue's hands was really a fake? Bei Chening, smiling happily, bumped Lan Xian's arm. "When have you ever seen Nangong lose?" Since Nangong dared to accept these stakes, then this proved his heart was sure of success long ago. This guy was simply a master at acting as if there weren't any incentives. By no means would he allow himself to suffer a loss. Lan Xian thought about it again. The facts were indeed like this. Therefore, he and Bei Chening speculated a bit, and stared at the Crown Prince with a laughing look, waiting to see what would happen. Their look made the Crown Prince's heart somewhat scared. The Crown Prince's heart was somewhat apprehensive at first. After all, it was still 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. Moreover, he still owed 1,500 green-colored crystal stones to Su Luo from before. If he was to lose this bet, he must take out 3,000 green-colored crystal stones. Even if you killed him, he wouldn't be able to pay it. However, when the Crown Prince saw Bei Chening and Lan Xian winking towards him, following this, his heart immediately calmed down. Humph, he didn't expect that Nangong would actually employ this kind of senseless method to deceive him by making him renege on this bet. So childish. The Crown Prince, with a few brush strokes, wrote down a letter of guarantee similar to the one he wrote before with Su Luo. Afterwards, everyone signed their names on the 3 copies. The Crown Prince had 1 copy, Nangong Luyun had another, and the last copy was like before, left in Bei Chening's hands. Now, how to prove that the amethyst crystal fish in His Highness the Crown Prince's hands is real? Bei Chening pretended to ponder while holding his chin. There is a very simple method. The real amethyst crystal fish will spit out 3 crystal stones per day, morning, noon, and night, not missing once. Then now, must we continue waiting? Nangong Luyun glanced faintly at the Crown Prince. Why abandon what is near to look for something far away? Bei Chening, through tactful understanding, immediately added an explanation to that sentence. The amethyst crystal fish is linked in countless ways in connection to the amethyst fish palace. It is said that having the amethyst crystal fish is like having a sensor and can assist in choosing the one path from the 9 routes up ahead. Furthermore, this road leads directly to the secret collection library. Chapter 398, Amethyst Fish Palace, 20. An amethyst crystal fish that could spit out crystal stones was naturally a treasure. However, after processing the amethyst crystal fish, it would be convenient to go straight to the secret collection library without stopping. As far as cultivators were concerned, this was the most attractive lure. The secret collection library, as the name implied, was a library with a collection of rare books. It was said that the library collection was abound with rare and secret martial arts technique books, and every kind of elemental systems cultivation methods also existed. This was the real reason why everyone entering the Amethyst Fish Palace would fight over the amethyst crystal fish. This was their true objective. And as to the place everyone was standing on now, it was a vast platform. Up ahead, with clouds and mist curling up and making it hard to see, appeared 9 roads in front of everyone. Nearly every road looked exactly the same. Basically, there was no way to distinguish them apart. However, among these 9 roads, there was only one safe road that led to the secret collection library. The remaining 8 other roads were very dangerous. After a narrow escape, it still might not lead directly to the secret collection library. The Crown Prince possessed the amethyst crystal fish, and the amethyst crystal fish had a connection to the distant secret collection library. If the amethyst crystal fish in the Crown Prince's hand was real, then the Crown Prince would be able to find the correct road that led directly to the secret collection library. The Crown Prince coldly smiled. Good, just this once. I will let you guys experience the secret to this amethyst crystal fish. The center of the Crown Prince's palm supported that small, sparkling, translucent, and pure amethyst crystal fish. In a split second, he pushed all the spirit force in his body into the body of that amethyst crystal fish, trying to conduct a joining of the mind with the amethyst crystal fish. Just at this time, the amethyst crystal fish's original body with a dull luster was as if it was set ablaze with light. In a flash, it started to shine. In addition, the originally transparent purple color had now become more and more red, brighter and brighter, with brilliant rays radiating all around that burned a person's eyes. The Crown Prince contemptuously cast a glance at Nangong Luyun and sneeringly said, "Don't you see? This is the real amethyst crystal fish." Nangong Luyun merely smiled but did not speak. His smile was not quite one, and he raised an eyebrow to look at him. In addition, he took the initiative to pull Su Luo along while retreating a step backwards. He thought about it and pulled Su Luo with him as he retreated backwards another step. As if thinking in this manner, they had already retreated to a safe range away. This action by Nangong Luyun suddenly, not lightly infuriated the Crown Prince. His heart was extremely vexed, wishing that he could rip Nangong Luyun apart. But he didn't have the means because Nangong Luyun's martial arts cultivation was much greater than his. If they were really to fight, he would only be tyrannized. The Crown Prince could only pour all the furious thoughts in his heart into the body of the amethyst crystal fish. An unending stream of spirit force rushed into the body of the amethyst crystal fish, with the fish becoming even more scarlet, a scarlet red. Moreover, if you paid close attention to it, you could see silken strands of smoke. The Crown Prince tried to link up with the amethyst crystal fish, but what made him despair was that the amethyst crystal fish seemed like an idiot without a soul. No matter how he called out to it, it never gave him any response. The Crown Prince thought it was because the spirit force he poured in was too little, so he could only add more vigor when conveying more spirit force into its body. However, it was still no good. Li Outyin frowned. "I'll do it." He advanced forward, extending his hand to lustfully grab that amethyst crystal fish. If before, the Crown Prince perhaps might still relinquish it, but with Su Luo's instigation, how could he still trust Li Outyin? One could see the Crown Prince weakly say, "You help me convey spirit force into this amethyst crystal fish together. I just don't believe I cannot make it open." Chapter 399, Amethyst Fish Palace, 21. Li Outyin really wished to enter the secret collection library a step earlier than everyone else. Seeing the crown prince this selfish and narrow-minded, he had no choice but to also agree. The two of them concentrated all their spirit force and poured it into the body of that amethyst crystal fish. Su Luo curiously peered around at them. Was linking up with the amethyst crystal fish really this difficult? In any case, it was easy for her to connect with her amethyst crystal fish. After a drop of blood, it recognized her as its owner, and she only needed to touch it with her mind, and she could communicate clearly with the amethyst crystal fish. She could also sense that emotion of deep admiration from a child coming through its body to her. When Su Luo was in the midst of indulging in flights of fancy, Nangong Luyun once again pulled her to take another few steps back. Bai Qining and Lan Xian, these several people, still hadn't taken notice of this action. When they turned their head around, thinking to speak with Nangong Luyun, they saw he had fallen back many steps. What kind of clever person was Bai Qining? These several people had grown up together with Nangong since little. With regards to his two-faced, wise, and far-sightedness, they naturally worshipped heartily. Everybody's rapport was very deep and extremely good. Bai Qining saw Nangong Luyun's position. Without saying anything further, with a whoosh sound he scuttled to stand behind Nangong Luyun. Lan Xian and Anya Ming also didn't fall behind. Their speed was as fast as whirlwind. With two whoosh sounds, they also at last arrived at Nangong Luyun's side. Their voluntary movements, these actions, were somewhat big. Not to mention, they had been the focal point of many people's attention all along. So each and every move they made was stared at by countless gazes. Seeing them repeatedly flee back, a trace of panic appeared on everyone's face. Without waiting for them to utter a question, the matter occurred without any ominous signs. Nevertheless, it could be said that the Crown Prince and Li Outyan's attention were completely focused on the little amethyst crystal fish's body. In the wake of more and more spirit force, the red color on that amethyst crystal fish became brighter and brighter. It became increasingly scalding to the hand. Now, even with the Crown Prince's cultivation level, he also felt it was hard to hold on to it. Li Outyan felt that something was wrong. Based on the secret written records in the Li family's treasure storehouse, it never mentioned that it would be this troublesome to open the link to amethyst crystal fish. Moreover, it would also not be burning hot to this degree, just when a faint sense of unease emerged in Li Outyan's heart. A catastrophe without the slightest warning signs occurred. One could only see the flaming red amethyst crystal fish in the Crown Prince's hand momentarily look like a huge bomb. A loud bang sounded. At lightning speed, it openly exploded. All the spirit force he and the Crown Prince had poured into it just a moment ago changed into a powerful, oval-shaped force that unfurled into the surroundings. Li Outyan's reaction was fast. His body was nimble. With speed as fast as lightning, he retreated back. However, because he was caught off guard, his chest was still burned by that sudden explosive force. He could clearly smell the stench of scorched flesh coming from his chest. Even Li Outyan was like this. Then the Crown Prince was even more tragic. One could only see that the hand he used to hold the amethyst crystal fish was blown to pieces. His face was painted black, completely unable to recognize his original features. His body was lit up like a raging inferno from the explosive burst. Flames were scattered all over his body, and half of his hair was nearly charred. However, it seemed the Crown Prince was wearing a soft protective armor on his body. As a result, his body still did not suffer too much harm. It was merely that anything above his neck seemed exceedingly shabby and atrocious. Apart from Li Outyan and the Crown Prince, this time, there were a great number of people who were affected by the explosion. There were a few smart ones who, after seeing Bai Qining Group's actions, had also followed in retreating back beforehand. However, the overwhelming majority of people, because of curiosity and wanting to see the amethyst crystal fish in order to be the first to burst into the correct path, their figures therefore hadn't moved. Thus, when the explosion's fluctuation assumed an oval shape that arrived to engulf everything, a lot of people were affected by that berserk force. Chapter 400, Amethyst Fish Palace, 22. Momentarily, all around the area, a lot of people's upper torsos were covered in flames, looking exceedingly disheveled and wretched. Moreover, these flames contained the Crown Prince and Li Outyan's spirit power. How could it be so easily extinguished? For a moment, the surroundings were messy and chaotic. Everywhere, cursing sounds and sounds of misery could be heard. The only people that were neat, clean, and unruffled in the midst of this chaos and were watching the drama was Nangong Liuyun's group of several people. Now, the expression on Bai Qinying's face was indescribably brilliant. He pointed at the Crown Prince's battered and exhausted appearance and burst into loud laughter with both hands on his hips. He was laughing so hard that tears were about to appear. You guys quickly look, Nangong Liuju's that appearance. Ha ha ha, simply as if he was pulled out of a pile of coal, simply too funny. He held his stomach and directly started to guffaw and ow out loud, laughing so hard that he nearly couldn't straighten his waist. Lan Xian also laughed uproariously with his hands on his waist. Guffaw, ow, guffaw, ow. The most laughable thing is that before, Nangong Liujue still took that fake for the real amethyst crystal fish. He still flaunted it in front of us as if it was the real thing. Ha ha ha, never mind if it was a fake, but to still fall for the fake's booby trap, you guys tell me. Isn't this the appropriate retribution? Anya Ming was not as excessively brash as those two, but his mood was obviously also very good. A spirited expression appeared in his beautiful eyes and he was smiling while shaking his head. The pitiful Crown Prince, going to contend with whoever would be good. But why did he stubbornly insist on seeking a fight with Nangong? Su Luo felt that this dramatic scene was also very amusing. She smilingly looked at Nangong Luyun. You, alas, as a guy, are being too perfidious, right? You definitely knew earlier that fake amethyst crystal fish would explode. Am I right? In addition, the more spirit force that was poured in, the more violent the explosion. Isn't that right? Nangong Luyun calmly and composedly folded his hands behind his back, raised an eyebrow and said, What kind of talk is this? How could this king be that kind of person who would disregard the masses? Su Luo gave a soft snort. This bastard was so obvious, but still said it with that kind of righteous-sounding pompousness, totally hypocritical. But she was still quite fond of this kind of him that put on a false act. What's to be done? Just like a pretentious, cute, little boy that was very lively and who had done a good deed wanting take credit and get acknowledgement from an adult with a still proud, lovable, little appearance. He was simply too adorable that she was about to burst. Su Luo thought up to hear and subconsciously went over to pinch Nangong Liuyun's cheek with a smile. However, just when her pair of hands pinched the 2 rounds of pink, tender flesh on Nangong Liuyun's cheeks, all of a sudden, she became aware that the surroundings were somewhat too quiet. She turned her head around. Bai Qinying and those 3 had assumed the state of a Buddhist statue, with stupefied, blank gazes that were staring at her hand. The depths of their eyes flashed with feelings of astonishment and stunned shock. Did she do something wrong? Su Luo gave a clear cough and very naturally withdrew her hand. Then, she swept Bai Qinying and them, the 3, with an indifferent glance. What are you looking at? Why aren't you guys watching the great play? Bai Qinying's huge eyes contained tears of excitement, almost to the point of kneeling for Su Luo. Didn't this miss know what she was doing? Even a mother, being loving and proud, wouldn't use this method to indulge a child. Could it be that she didn't know that what Nangong loathed the most was someone bumping him, and he hated it the most when someone touched his face, okay? What he was most disgusted with was when someone pinched his cheeks, okay? Remembering back then, the most favored Li senior concubine in the palace, in order to show the virtuousness of a wife that was good-natured and good in traditional roles, she insincerely went to pinch Nangong's face. Just wanting to tease him, Bai Qinying almost didn't want to recall the scene from that time. Not only did this Miss Su do it, she still acted out the entire set. She unexpectedly actually extended her hands to pinch Nangong's cheeks. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? Even though honestly speaking, Nangong really did like her, but this kind of thing was a basic principle. he certainly would not permit it to be destroyed, right? Chapter 401. Amethyst Fish Palace, 23. Bei Qining was just staring at Nangong's hand, trying to time when he was about to take ruthless action, so that he would then be ready to rush over and save Su Luo. However, at this time, Nangong Liuyun's action nearly toppled more than 10 years of the Nangong he recognized, making him deeply doubt that for this past decade or so, whether he had lived in vain. He saw that not only was Nangong Liuyun not offended, on the contrary, he reached out to pinch the bulging little meatball-like cheeks on Su Luo's face. His smiling expression was devilishly charming. "You actually dared to pinch this king. For you to grow this ability, tisk." Unexpectedly, Nangong hasn't gotten angry. This was greatly beyond and contrary to the three childhood friends' expectations. The three childhood friends looked at each other in disbelief. Finally, they could only silently cast their gazes onto Su Luo's body. They left an extremely worshipful and meaningful gaze on her face. Today's matter, there was only her. If it changed to another person, their corpse would have already been horizontal at the scene. However, they really need to reassess this girl's place in Nangong's heart. Before, although they already regarded her as very important, yet, with the facts as proof of her repeatedly visiting Nangong's bottom line while Nangong continued to indulge her, it could clearly be seen that they still underestimated her. Nangong indifferently swept them a glance. Consequently, the three people neatly and with identical movements turned their gazes to the spectacle on the program up ahead. Now, the people at the Crown Prince's side swarmed around him, helping the Crown Prince to extinguish the crowd of tiny flames. However, the marks were still there. The brocade robe on the Crown Prince's body was dark and swarthy. In addition, there were lots of small holes from being engulfed by the tongues of the flame. His attire was worse than the tattered rags worn by a beggar. The most eye-catching thing was his right hand. Before, that hand was still holding the amethyst crystal fish which he flaunted, but now, his right hand had been blown flying by that fake amethyst crystal fish. Although the blood had already been stopped, there were several missing and broken-off fingers. It was a ghostly sight to behold, and the bare bones were frightening. The Crown Prince's left hand held his right wrist as he walked towards where Nangong Liuyun was standing while panting with rage. He snarled loudly at him, full of rage. "Is it because you already knew earlier that there was a problem with this purple fish? Am I right?" Although he used a question, the Crown Prince's tone, however, was basically assertion, firm in the belief that Nangong Liuyun had already known earlier. Nangong Liuyun glanced at him, once with indifference, his gaze sweeping towards Bei Qining. Bei Qining smiling happily and took a step to stand out, and with a laughing out loud and smiling expression. "Hey, Your Highness the Crown Prince, are you here to settle your debt? You are able to so quickly gather together 1,500 green-colored crystal stones?" Originally, the Crown Prince was in a towering rage, but then he suddenly felt his chest becoming suffocated. He stared blankly with a stupefied expression at Bei Qining for a long time before recovering his senses. Heavens, just a moment ago, he actually stupidly made a bet with Nangong Liuyun that the amethyst crystal fish was real. The stake was 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. Recalling this matter, the Crown Prince's face immediately turned green. His mouth continued to open and shut for several times, unable to say a word. Bei Qining, smiling happily, patted his shoulder. Not urgent in any case. The receipt is present. After we go back, it's still not too late to pay it back. Rest assured, Nangong won't press you right now. However, 3,000 green-colored crystal stones, oh, my Crown Prince." The Crown Prince only felt his forehead echoing with a buzzing sound. Suddenly, for a period of time, both the sky and earth started to spin, and his mind was even more of a blank space. He wished he could immediately pass out, treating this as if nothing ever happened. But even if he were to pass out, the green-colored crystal stones he owed must still be returned. Bei Qining closely watched him with a narrow smile. Lan Xian and An Yiming also raised an eyebrow and watched him with a faint smile. Their gazes made the crown prince flee in a panic state from being stuck in a dilemma. Seeing the crown prince staggering along while fleeing, Bei Qining placed both hands on his waist and started to laugh uproariously. Chapter 402 Amethyst Fish Palace 24. When the crown prince heard his laugh that was full of evil intent, he ran even faster. The crown prince brought along a group of people and rushed towards that road. The 9 paths up ahead, without interacting with the amethyst crystal fish, the risks for any of the paths were all the same to him. Since the risk was all the same, then with everyone going together, it would be better than one person fighting on alone. After the crown prince and Li Outyin talked it over, they decided to walk through the first road. The surrounding crowd of people were all standing around in a circle, watching His Highness Prince Jin impatiently, hoping to follow behind him. Nangong Luyun merely crooned out an indifferent sentence. This king will be the last to go. The implication was that he refused to let people form a group to follow him. Nobody was an idiot, since His Highness Prince Jin clearly said he wouldn't allow anyone to follow him. If you followed him, then with his emotionless, savage temper, if you weren't killed by the magical beasts along the way, you would be killed by His Highness Prince Jin. Therefore, this method would not work. Everyone, with no other alternative, could only unwillingly and with uncertainty, followed behind the crown prince and walked towards the first passageway. The first passageway, a lot of people often wouldn't dare to select it, but the crown prince actually chose it. This was the so-called taking the road contrary to the expected direction. This was probably what he was thinking. The Jade Lake's fairy stood in the distance, looking towards Su Luo's direction from the distance. Seeing Nangong Luyun and Su Luo's flirtatious and close manner, a malicious ray of light flashed through her eyes. Li Outyin gave her a tug. His tone was coldly cruel. "Let's go. There is no use in watching some more." No matter how she gazed at him with deep emotions, third senior brother wouldn't bother to glance at her. Li Yaoyao reluctantly took back her gaze and said with a frown, "Do we really need to follow after that moron and go with him?" Don't know if it was because of superstition, but ever since they joined the crown prince on the same path, afterwards, things of bad luck immediately came following them. It really had been terrible luck. Li Outyin's tone was coldly indifferent. To have a free shield, not using it would be a waste. "Let's go. Stop looking." His heart has changed. His heart doesn't have you anymore. No matter what you do, it is useless. The Jade Lake's fairy's complexion suddenly changed. A malevolent expression flashed through her eyes, raising her voice to say, "No. Third senior brother is mine. He must be mine." Li Outyin, seeing her so stirred up, was a little distracted. Then in his heart, he sighed again for this younger sister. "Second older brother." The Jade Lake's fairy's tone echoed faintly, light as wind. If you didn't listen carefully, it would be hard to hear clearly. One could hear the touch of iron and the murderous bloody intent in her dark tone. "Help me kill her." This her, who it indicated, Li Outyin was naturally very clear about. Li Outyin not only didn't refuse, but instead heavily nodded his head. "Yao Yao, you should rest assured that that girl would cheat you like this. How could second older brother allow her to live on this earth?" The corner of Jade Lake's fairy's mouth hooked into a sneer. Glancing back, she looked deeply at Su Luo. She then turned and left with confidence and ease. Second older brother had always been good at keeping his words. "Su Luo, you just wait to die." It was a pity that Su Luo and them completely didn't hear Li Outyin's words. Now, all the surrounding people were gone. Bei Qining, in a somewhat puzzled manner, looked at Nangong Luyun. "We should start walking, right? Which passageway should we take?" He had already looked left and right, but felt that every road was the same. If you asked him to choose, he would absolutely do the same as the crown prince and leave it completely to luck. The corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth lifted into a demonically charming and alluring smile. He raised an eyebrow and looked at Su Luo. Su Luo concentrated her thoughts, her mind moved, and an exquisite, small and delicate purple-colored goldfish appeared in the center of her palm that she just spread open. Her fair as jade palm had a small, delicate, cute amethyst crystal fish reclining calmly and not moving in it. That little purple fish seemed to be alive, with its two black eyes blinking. Amethyst crystal fish. Beichening bounced over in a flash with both eyes shining. Chapter 403. Amethyst Fish Palace, 25. It can't be the real amethyst crystal fish. Lan Xian also came over immediately after, with a mystified expression across his entire face. This seems to be the real amethyst crystal fish. Anya Ming examined it for quite a while, before unhurriedly arriving at a conclusion. Afterwards, he looked at Su Luo with a complex expression. What seems like it? Of course it is the real one. Nangong Luyun cast them a glance, showing his dissatisfaction with their doubt. It seemed as if Beichening thought of something. Immediately, he was extremely happy. Well, as it turns out, you already knew earlier that the real amethyst crystal fish was in sister-in-law's hands. Therefore, secure in your knowledge, you then went to extort the crown prince, isn't it so? Isn't it obvious? Nangong Luyun calmly, and as if it should rightfully be so, raised an eyebrow. The two of you, Beichening, full of a righteous sense of justice, criticized. One used amethyst thorn fish to defraud 1,500 green-colored crystal stones from the crown prince before, and the other one used the amethyst crystal fish to defraud another 1,500 green-colored crystal stones from the crown prince. You guys are still really, if not from the same family, then won't enter the same family's door. 1. A match made in heaven and truly a pair of super two-faced people. Nangong Luyun expressed that Beichen Ying's last sentence touched deeply his desires. Therefore, with regards to his criticism, he accepted all of it. He also satisfiedly nodded his head. What you said is very good. Lan Xian again moved closer with misgivings across his entire face. But how could the amethyst crystal fish be in sister-in-law's hands? Weren't all the good stone rooms snatched away by everyone else? Weren't you guys the last ones to arrive? Beichening, Anya Ming, one by one, also expressed their puzzlement. Nangong Luyun, with one hand hugging Su Luo's slender shoulder, raised an eyebrow with self-satisfaction. Again, so what? Again, so what? Beichening stammered while saying, that means it was practically impossible for you guys to obtain the amethyst crystal fish from previous years. The good room numbers were all written down by everyone. Nangong Luyun faintly smiled, pointed to Su Luo. Impossible or not, ask my family's little Luo. Hissed Beichening. The three of them inhaled a breath of cold air. This amethyst crystal fish was obtained by sister-in-law? Nangong Luyun was more proud than if he had gotten it himself. Very smugly, he raised his chin to croon. That is only natural, also not seeing whose it is. Su Luo crossly rolled her eyes at him. Regardless of whose it is still not your family's wife. Beichening and the three of them, with a sound, let out their laughter. Nangong Luyun peevishly pinched the tip of Su Luo's nose. This girl, will anything happen if you don't undermine me? Just like this, won't give this king some face. Beichening and the three of them really held Su Luo in esteem, simply admiring her to the point of prostrating themselves in adulation. Like Nangong, this kind of man, there were a countless number of women who, after bathing clean, would line up waiting to sleep with him. Whatever looks he wanted in a woman, how could he not have? However, contrary to reason, he just hanged himself on Su Luo's tree to die, and not only was he perfectly happy to do so, he was still complacent about it. Really didn't know what to say to him that would be good. This really made them, his childhood friends, fume with rage between gritted teeth. Su Luo pushed Nangong Luyun away. Don't disturb me, I'm doing something serious here. Once this was said, everyone became silent. With a burning pair of eyes, they stared at that little purple fish in Su Luo's palm. They were waiting for it to tell them the correct path to take. Su Luo closed her pair of eyes tightly and carefully placated the purple fish full of spirit. The little purple fish seemed to have been lonely for a long time. With great difficulty, A master with an aura that it was very fond of appeared, and suddenly, it was extremely excited. It talked non-stop. Su Luo's mind was forced to accept innumerable bits of information. A lot of it was very ancient news. All the information spun around, making her dizzy. It was quite a while before the excited little purple fish stopped. In the moment it took a break, Su Luo took advantage of the gap to ask which path they ought to take. 1. If not from the same family, then won't enter the same family's door. This is a Chinese idiom that is used to describe a pair of very compatible couples. A similar but more general English saying is that birds of a feather flock together. Chapter 404, Amethyst Fish Palace, 26. The little purple fish, not without some scorn, swept a glance at Su Luo, and in passing, pointed to the road in the middle, that was to say, the fifth path. Naturally it's there. Does it even need to be said? Okay. The Su Luo, being looked down upon, opened her eyes. Her gaze encountered a group of male eyes that were full of hope. Su Luo lifted her hand very much like a queen. Follow me. Consequently, a party of 4 youngsters, every one of them young masters from influential aristocratic families, where if their names were spoken outside, could make the ground of Eastern Ling Empire shake 3 times. All of them now, in a humble little brother manner, slavishly followed behind Su Luo, giving a yes ma'am, following blindly appearance. Bei Qining very quickly moved closer. Sister-in-law, was this amethyst crystal fish really found by you? Then who else? Su Luo irritatedly looked at him once. How did you finally find it? Bei Qining was extremely curious. They rushed ahead so fast. Every one of them had gotten hold of a good room, so why didn't they get as good a treatment as her? Su Luo's explanation, in his ears, made him even more depressed. Just like that we walked in and got it? Su Luo very innocently said, "Oh, that's right, at that time. The Jade Lake's fairy was just dithering in front of the door. After she abandoned it, then we were able to enter that room." Bei Qining felt somewhat dizzy for a moment. This luck was great to what extent that she could snatch the treasure from the hand of a rival in love without batting an eyelid. Then, after going in, just what magical beast hindered the path? Bei Qining somewhat curiously asked. His luck was really surprisingly different. At that time when he entered, there was a saber-toothed tiger guarding the door. The deeper he went, the more saber-toothed tigers there were. If it weren't for his martial arts being tolerable enough that he could get by, very likely today, he would be finished in there. In addition, the even more miserable thing was, not to speak of treasures, he didn't even get a hair. Lan Xin, standing on the side, fiercely nodded his head, and with a pitiful appearance. The magical beast guarding the amethyst crystal fish ought to be very terrible, right? The stone room he entered was a little better than the one little shadow entered. At least, there was some broken copper and scrap iron. However, the magical beasts could be counted in piles. Killing them took him more than 10 trips of going back and forth before he was able to clean up all the monsters. Thus, he was able to protect his life to come out. Su Luo's expression was somewhat innocent. Magical beasts? What magical beasts? We simply did not see even a hair of a magical beast. Nangong, what do you say? Finished, Su Luo very kind-heartedly sought confirmation from Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun raised an eyebrow and smiled. Silly girl, before they were running that fast, it was because they wanted to find a few magical beasts to temper their skills, so it turned out to be like that. Su Luo very obediently nodded her head and said to Bei Qining, "Following along this walk with us, it is unlikely to come across any magical beasts. However, if you still want to temper your skills, then change to another road, okay?" Bei Qining wanted to cry but had no tears. Why would he want to temper his skills? Those magical beasts were all very awe-inspiring. Okay? Bei Qining pulled at Su Luo's sleeves. "Sister-in-law, don't abandon me." Nangong Luyun picked him up, throwing him aside just like tossing a cleaning rag. "Move a little further away." "Why?" Being cast aside, Bei Qining expressed was very unconvinced. "The air you spit out is too smelly. It will fumigate my family's little Luo Luo too much." Nangong Luyun randomly found a reason to fob him off. Bei Qining pointed at Nangong Luyun, practically glaring at him somewhat speechlessly. Shameless. A man caught in the snare of love was simply too shameless. With the opposite sex, he didn't even have any humanity left. Nangong Luyun didn't even pay any goddamn attention to him. He only inquired after little Luo's well-being and a bunch of other nonsense. This kind of disparity in treatment, seeing it simply made Bei Qining jealous to death. Su Luo rolled her eyes at Nangong. We have arrived at the place. Prepare to fight. Chapter 405, Secret Collection Room 1. In the wake of Su Luo's order, everybody made preparations to fight. Up ahead in this corridor, a tiny light started to appear. Everybody closely followed Su Luo's footsteps, cautiously and solemnly walking quietly on tiptoes. They held their breath, wary and alert as they walked forward, while Nangong Luyun merely pulled Su Luo to behind him and walked to the very front of this procession. This subtle action, maybe it was a subconscious movement on his part, but exactly because of this, Su Luo now felt especially warm inside. She lifted her eyes to glance once at Nangong Luyun. Now, his whole attention was concentrated up ahead. The side view of his face was as perfect as the ancient Greek gods. He had a conscientious and cautious expression. Compared to his normal image of despising worldly conventions, it was completely different. Su Luo forgot who was it that said this. A serious man was the most fascinating. Now, she felt this sentence was quite right. She had seen too much of his cruel, untamed appearance that despised worldly conventions. This was the first time she saw his serious side. Unexpectedly, she felt he was especially fascinating, making it nearly impossible for her to shift her gaze away. Just at this moment, the muffled sound of a magical beast's howl came from up ahead. Nangong Luyun's expression changed slightly, and he stopped his footsteps. What is it? Bei Qining lowered his voice to ask in a whisper. Nangong Luyun didn't look at him, but stressing each syllable seriously and with a heavy atmosphere, said 4 words, 8th rank magical beast, hissed Bei Qining in them. The 3 inhaled a breath of cold air. Along this path, it had been very safe. Not even the fur of a magical beast could be seen. Didn't expect that almost at the end, unexpectedly, an 8th rank magical beast would appear. 8th rank magical beast, that was what kind of concept? The 3 of them were all 6th rank. Nangong Luyun was a little better, yet only 7th rank. Su Luo cough, that little strength could be ignored and disregarded. Okay. 3 6th rank, 1 7th rank. If it was an expert from the human race, then they could fight it. But the opponent was a magical beast. When a magical beast was at the same rank as a human, their strength would be greater by a lot. Bei Qining suddenly felt an extremely bad headache and asked with some annoyance, "Isn't this supposed to be the safe passageway? All along the way, it would be unimpeded and unhindered? To actually have an 8th rank magical beast to appear?" In a split second, everyone's gaze concentrated on Su Luo's body. The amethyst crystal fish was hers. It was also her, and it that communicated. The responsibility naturally was placed on her. Su Luo gave a very innocent expression. This amethyst crystal fish of mine is absolutely the real one. Saying this, she sought confirmation from Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun nodded slightly, showing he could confirm it was true. Su Luo speechlessly grabbed her hair. Obviously, this little thing told me to take the 5th path. Didn't you say to walk according to the amethyst crystal fish's instructions, and it would be fine? The 3 of them, including Bei Qining, with faces full of doubt, looked at Su Luo. You are certain it is the 5th passageway? That is what the little purple fish said. Su Luo said with much certainty. She once again took out the amethyst crystal fish and wanted to ask for clarifications. However, what made her entire face become full of backlines was that when she glanced over at this little guy in her head, she saw it was actually breathing deeply, sound asleep. It was sleeping like the dead. No matter how she called out, it still wouldn't respond at all. Su Luo could only helplessly spread out her hands toward those 3 people and told the truth. It fell asleep, The corner of Bei Qinying's mouth pursed. He was itching to grab this little guy by the tail and spank its bottom. Then what's to be done? Bei Qinying finally still handed over the deciding authority to Nangong Luyun. Nangong Luyun had a complex expression as he looked at Su Luo, thought about it, and then said, Luo will remain here. The four of us going over will be enough. Wait. Su Luo took out an exquisite, little red sandalwood case. Very carefully, she handed it over to Nangong Luyun. You take this, maybe it will be useful. Chapter 406, Secret Collection Room, 2. Nangong Liuyun's mood was clearly very good. His smiling expression seemed a little foolish. He hugged Su Luo tightly, before releasing after quite a while, and then returned that red sandalwood case once again to Su Luo's hand. He hooked her nose with his finger, beaming with joy, and said, That I could get you to be concerned and care about me. How could this little danger count as anything? Saying this, he released Su Luo, turned around and left. Nangong, Su Luo called out to stop him, and Nangong Luyun halted his footsteps. Su Luo yelled seriously to his back, You must be careful. You are not allowed to return injured. Okay. Nangong Liuyun's back was to her. The corner of his mouth was plastered in an extremely joyful, pampering, and light smile. His eyes were demonically charming and alluring, to the point of enticing all living things. He finished speaking, and leading the three of them, including Bei Qinying, left with quick strides. Very shortly, the furious roars of a magical beast and fighting sounds could be heard coming from up ahead. Su Luo thought about it, and then followed after them. How could Su Luo really stay here and wait to be saved? If she really didn't have the strength to defend herself, going there would cause trouble for them. Then, she naturally would listen obediently and wait here for the results, so as not to create difficulties for her own team. However, now, she had a spirit pinball in her hand. A spirit pinball condensed by a peak 7th rank expert before death with astonishingly formidable power. Very likely, its strength was even greater than Nangong Liuyun's. If it was like this, how could she obediently and foolishly stay in the original place while letting her companions go risk life and limb on her behalf? Su Luo used her hand to tightly grip onto that spirit pinball. Exhibiting her spirit dance steps, she quietly swept towards the place up front. Since obtaining the Lu family's spirit dance steps, nobody in Lu family could cultivate it. On the contrary, Su Luo conveniently got it cheaply. If Lu family's elder ancestor found out, maybe he would be infuriated to the point of vomiting out blood again. Not very long later, Su Luo arrived at the place where both parties were fighting. This was not like the narrow passageway from before. Rather, it was nearly 100 square meters of open space. The lighting all around was very bright. Fighting against Nangong Liuyun's group was a fierce, black-colored tiger. The fierce black tiger looked exceptionally ferocious. Its hair was suffused with a faint luster with a malevolent appearance. Its front fangs were sharp, and that robust, powerful body, at one glance, you could tell it was full of attack power. Nangong Luyun and them stood separately in each of the four directions, forming a square shape. They simply besieged it while it was standing in the middle. Nangong Luyun was the main fighter with the most laborious task of attracting all of the black fierce tiger's hatred, which was part of an obvious plan. He received all of its attacks. Matching up to an 8th rank magical beast, the him at 7th rank actually wasn't even a bit frantic. The techniques he used were steady and firm. He continued throwing moves at it non-stop. The three of them, including Bei Qinying, constantly mounted sneak attacks on the black fierce tiger. They were using assassination technique, attempting to cause it a fatal injury stealthily. Both sides fought very fiercely and bitterly, as if depending on a lottery ticket, all except for Nangong Luyun, that is. Bei Qinying was even more miserable. It seemed as if the fierce black tiger had fixed its attention on him. Even though he ran away very quickly, the clothing on his body was nearly torn to shreds by the fierce tiger's sharp claws. Only a few strands of tattered clothing hung on his body, making him look more bedraggled than a beggar. His flawless cheeks also had a few lines of blood from being torn by those sharp claws. It looked terribly sinister. The fierce black tiger was not a fool. Very quickly, it was able to see through Nangong Liuyun's strategy. It took the risk of being stabbed and kicked its leg to the left, towards Lan Xian, kicking him ruthlessly into the wall. Then, it stuck close to the wall and jumped to the floor. Lan Xian covered his chest and repeatedly coughed. He couldn't suppress it and spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. Only then did his vigor slowly return. After the fierce black tiger kicked Lan Xian away, again it slapped its paw towards Beichen Ing on its right. With regards to these few little fleas that constantly jumped up and down, the fierce black tiger felt it was pestered beyond endurance. First, it should get rid of these creatures, then concentrate its mind on the opponent that was most difficult to deal with. That huge claw gave off formidable power, carrying with it an inexhaustible strength. Chapter 407, Secret Collection Room 3. It slapped towards Beichen Ying's head with a thunderous roar, with the strength of 5,000 kilograms. Careful. Nangong Liuyun's expression changed slightly. However, no sooner said than done. Hu Nangong Liuyun stood too far away, wanted to rush forth to save him, but it was already too late. If Beichen Ying was slapped by that huge claw, his whole head would become paste. Seeing that his life was in imminent peril, just at this critical moment, Su Luo appeared. Nobody would have anticipated. Even Su Luo herself hadn't expected that her appearance would completely change this fight, with their side that was thoroughly at a disadvantage. Su Luo's hand held that spirit pinball, just when she was about to toss it at the fierce black tiger, but all of a sudden, her expression changed. Just when she was about to toss it, the spirit pinball had already been replaced with the amethyst crystal fish. This was not because Su Luo was reluctant to use the spirit pinball, rather, it was the result of the amethyst crystal fish screeching in her head. Su Luo's control of her strength was very good, and she directly sent the amethyst crystal fish smashing towards that fierce black tiger's claw that was full of formidable power. Originally, that claw was merely 10 centimeters away from Beichen Ying's head. However, due to an extra amethyst crystal fish appearing above Beichen Ying's head, that fierce black tiger abruptly restrained its claw. It directly grabbed towards that amethyst crystal fish and immediately uncaringly abandoned Beichen Ying. The fierce black tiger, with both hands, cupped that amethyst crystal fish. It had a somewhat incredulous and also extremely excited expression. The originally intense battle, because of the fierce black tiger having stopped fighting, quieted down. Nangong Liuyun walked quickly to Su Luo's side. With a dark face, he coldly chided her. "Didn't I tell you to be obedient and stay behind? How could you be this disobedient?" Su Luo somewhat embarrassingly stuck out her tongue, but wouldn't say anything. "Didn't I tell you that this was an 8th rank magical beast? What is a minor, insignificant little 3rd rank doing over here? Do you dislike not dying quickly enough? Am I right?" Nangong Liuyun's expression was coldly solemn, overbearingly interrogating her, a trace of lingering fear and concern flashing through his eyes. He was really fierce. Su Luo stuck her tongue out. "Isn't it because I was worried about you?" Su Luo said in a very low voice with her head hanging down. "What did you say?" Nangong Liuyun's originally furious expression stiffened in a split second. Afterwards, he asked somewhat unnaturally, "If you didn't hear it, then forget it." "Humph. If it was not for me coming, you guys won't be able to beat it." Su Luo, not without some smugness, raised an eyebrow. "I just saved Beichen Ying's life. Hey, Beichen Ying, do you admit to this grace of saving your life?" "Acknowledged, acknowledged. I certainly will admit to it. I must admit it." Beichen Ying shook his head and, with great difficulty, became clear-headed. Now, he was still patting his chest from the lingering fear. "Just a moment ago, I really did take a trip to the gates of hell. Even now, my heart is still jumping with be-a-thump sounds." Su Luo smugly raised an eyebrow towards Nangong Liuyun. "Did you not see he was saved by me? Nangong Luyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Finally, he could only let out a deep sigh and in a spoiling manner, rubbed her head. This time, it is because your luck was good. Next time, you need to be obedient. Have you memorized it? Which time has my luck been bad? Su Luo, who was somewhat unconvinced, said, luck is also a part of strength. This you must acknowledge as the truth. While they were speaking, Lan Xian, who had been sent flying into the wall by one kick from the fierce black tiger, covered his chest that was hurting and walked over with lurching steps. He was very perplexed as he interrupted. What's going on? Is there an armistice? Bei Qining disgruntledly kicked him in the butt. Pointing at the fierce black tiger that was still super excited, he peevishly rolled his eyes. Haven't you grown some eyes? Still can't see clearly? This matter was obviously something that could be avoided. However, alas, our battle could be considered to have been fought in vain. This injury was also suffered in vain. Chapter 408, Secret Collection Room, 4. Lan Xian now finally came to a realization, with both eyes opened wide like huge copper bells. He stammered his sentences because of feeling that it was too incredulous, too obscure. As it turns out, the so-called obtaining the amethyst crystal fish enables a person to smoothly pass through the routes is real. It was actually in this manner. We are truly foolish through and through, to still go as far as to come to blows with this huge, foolish tiger. Obviously, as long as they had shown the amethyst crystal fish, then it would have been fine. However, they actually chose the most idiotic, most primitive, and most barbaric way. Lan Xian touched the wound on his chest. A moment ago, it still didn't hurt. Now, after knowing the truth, he felt it was extremely painful. It hurt so much that he almost passed out. Momentarily, the surrounding mood was somewhat complicated. Everyone was all speechlessly glaring at that fierce black tiger who was holding the amethyst crystal fish. Each and every one of them was fuming with rage between gritted teeth, but had no way to vent their anger. Su Luo coughed clearly twice to break this awkward atmosphere. Okay. Isn't this because of inexperience? Fall into the moat, and you'll be wiser next time. Next time, we'll know it. Lan Xian silently cast her a glance. He touched his wounded chest again. As a person who hadn't been kicked into the wall, how could she understand his complicated state of mind right now? Su Luo very kindly patted his shoulder. You should think of the good side. If it was not for the amethyst crystal fish appearing just in time, this chest of yours also would not be kicked only once. Lan Xian. Su Luo's attention returned to the body of the fierce black tiger. She very cautiously walked up to the front of it a step. Even though the fighting had already subsided, the amethyst crystal fish was still in the fierce black tiger's hand. How could she get it back without sending in an army and not being met with bloodshed? It was very obvious that this slow-witted tiger had some kind of a peculiar, complicated feeling towards the amethyst crystal fish. Su Luo was only able to take one step forward before Nangong Luyun, with one tug, pulled her behind him. He still didn't forget to send her a quick glare. Want to court death? Su Luo's mouth deflated a little. Slyly, she secretly thought. This stingy male, perhaps his temper still hadn't cooled yet, right? Su Luo squeezed out a smiling expression that carried a touch of cajoling. Don't be so nervous. The amethyst crystal fish has already acknowledged me as its master. How could that foolish tiger attack me? You should feel at ease. Saying this, Su Luo pushed Nangong Luyun away and took a step forward again. Just at this time, this unstable situation suddenly changed. One could only see that huge, foolish tiger return to his senses from his state of excitement. That pair of naturally cold eyes imposingly shot towards Su Luo's location. Afterwards, its huge body sprung towards Su Luo, pouncing over to her. Careful. Nangong Liuyun's complexion changed slightly. Sister-in-law, be careful. Bei Qining and them rapidly gathered together to form a wall in front of Su Luo. They steadily protected Su Luo, who was now behind them. However, That huge, foolish tiger's speed did not decrease, and still as before, pounced ferociously towards Su Luo. Its two front claws were sharp as a dagger that glittered like frost and snow, with a threatening, murderous aura. The pair of claws danced in the wind. Swish, swish, swish. The three sounds resounded in succession. Bei Chening, Lan Xian, On Ye Ming. The three of them were separately flipped flying by this huge, foolish tiger. Afterwards, each and every one of them smashed into the wall, grimacing from the pain. Nangong Liuyun's expression condensed into frost. He concentrated all the spirit force from his body and struck at the huge, foolish tiger with all his strength. Yet, the huge, foolish tiger only opened its mouth like a bloody, sacrificial bowl towards Nangong Liuyun's hand. Just at this critical moment, Su Luo, in one move, pushed Nangong Liuyun away. If not, Nangong Liuyun's right arm would have simply been swallowed by the huge, foolish tiger. One could only see a flash of white light, and Su Luo's palm was already gripping that spirit pinball. Just when she was, with no holds barred, prepared to use that spirit pinball on the huge, foolish tiger's body, when who would have thought the huge, foolish tiger, with one move, had stopped Su Luo with a bare hug. Its huge head rubbed back and forth against her shoulder, and its huge, moist tongue licked her face and pasted her face with saliva. In the end, it left behind an area full of sticky saliva. Chapter 409, Secret Collection Room, 5. Su Luo was dumbfounded. Nangong Liuyun stared blankly. Bei Chening, Lan Xian, and On Ye Ming, who were rushing over wanting to save her, were also stupefied to a stop. That huge, foolish tiger saw that Su Luo didn't respond to it and seemed to be a little unhappy. With a low voice, it snarled at Su Luo. It roared and howled, shouting randomly, as if trying to attract her attention. Su Luo, while wiping off the sticky saliva on her face, suddenly had an urge to look up at the sky and start cursing. Who had she incur the wrath of or provoked? The huge, foolish tiger thought that Su Luo really liked its affectionate gesture. With a joyous sound, it once again rushed up to Su Luo and started to lick her face with its huge tongue. The huge, foolish tiger's figure was very big and strong. That tongue was bigger than an iron fan. A licking tongue rolled past, making Su Luo feel as if a burst of gale had blown past, and her body swayed back and forth. That fishy stench smelled so bad that she almost cried. In the beginning, Bei Chening was still very envious. Being able to be liked by this huge, foolish tiger, wouldn't it be such a great achievement? After seeing Su Luo's forced and suffering appearance, immediately, he had an expression full of extreme sympathy. Bei Chening movingly and tragically looked at Su Luo, as if secretly saying, "In order to maintain a short period of peace, sister-in-law's life is honestly not very easy." Nangong Liuyun saw Su Luo with her eyes tightly closed, frowning and standing there distractedly. Suddenly, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With one hand, he pulled Su Luo to him, and using the sleeves of his other hand to wipe her face, he was smiling while wiping away. "How about it? Still okay?" After wiping her dry with great difficulty, Su Luo finally sucked in a deep breath of air, and after a while, she finally said, "At last, I can breathe." Way too trying. Just a moment ago, that sticky liquid was pasted all over her face, giving her a feeling of being covered in a face mask. The huge, foolish tiger's enormous body sat in front of Su Luo. Its large eyes silently and with an aggrieved expression looked at her. Its eyes also had a mistreated expression from being ignored. Su Luo was immediately speechless. This was the formidable, awe-inspiring, great, fierce tiger that would utterly defeat Nangong Liuyun. The four of them's joint attacks, the 8th rank magical beast. Okay? Shouldn't it be the kind that was extremely arrogant, a living mystical existence, proud and pampered? Why on earth would it show this kind of seeking to be petted and comforted appearance, as if acting cute? She was the one that was the most wronged, okay? The huge, foolish tiger called out a few times towards Su Luo with a lowered voice, and once again pitifully lowered its eyes. It looked simply heartbroken with a very downcast mood. Su Luo perplexedly scratched her hair. In the end, what's going on? Nangong Luyun observed even the smallest details and was the first to see through everything. One could only see him frown slightly. It seemed to be drooling over some kind of treasure on your body. Some kind of treasure on her body? Su Luo sank into deep doubt. To say there were many treasures on her body, then there weren't many. To say there were only a few, then that was also untrue. Don't tell her that she needed to take them out one by one for it to choose. Alas, if only the little divine dragon was here, then everything would be fine. He should be able to communicate with the huge, foolish tiger. Unfortunately, that gluttonous little guy now was sprawled on his back, lying within her space and snoring away, sound asleep. His plump little belly, in the wake of his breathing, bulged out again and again, looking extremely adorable. Su Luo's gaze swept through her space. Suddenly, she stopped at a certain place. That's right. How could she have forgotten about this treasure? At that time, the little divine dragon was seduced to her side because of this spirit spring. Afterwards, she experimented it on the dragon-scaled horse, and it was quite evident that the dragon-scaled horse was also very fond of the celestial spirit water. Once again, even later, she relied on adding celestial spirit water into the fish food, opening a killing road in all directions and hooking a full 1,500 amethyst thorned fishes. The above-mentioned events were all signs which clearly indicated that magical beasts were extremely fond of celestial spirit water. Could it be that this huge, foolish tiger was looking for celestial spirit water? But how did the huge, foolish tiger know that her space had celestial spirit water? Su Luo's gaze floated towards the amethyst crystal fish being held tightly in the palm of the huge, foolish tiger. Chapter 410, Secret Collection Room, 6. Okay, this was absolutely a little traitor. Su Luo, half believing and half doubting, took out a cup of celestial spirit water from her own space. Without waiting for her to hold it steadily, the huge, foolish tiger, in an instant, rushed towards her. Its huge body directly threw itself at her. Su Luo stumbled back a step, and Nangong Luyun easily grabbed hold of her hand, stabilizing her. The cup in her hand swayed back and forth. Without waiting for the celestial spirit water to be poured out, the huge, foolish tiger had already swallowed whole the water along with the cup. It didn't even bother to chew. With one mouthful, it swallowed everything cleanly and neatly. Without waiting for Su Luo to return to her senses, the huge, foolish tiger once again enthusiastically threw itself at Su Luo. It extended its long and thick tongue to lick towards Su Luo's face. Without any doubt, this was absolutely the huge, foolish tiger's way of showing its enthusiasm towards humans. However, Su Luo was really unable to bear this kind of enthusiastic manner. She raised her hands in surrender and took out another cup of water to pour into its wide-open mouth, to block its affectionate manner towards her. It was not because Su Luo was unwilling to part with some celestial spirit water. It was really because this huge, foolish tiger was not easy to wait upon. If she directly gave it a wooden bucket of celestial spirit water, then it absolutely would still be unsatisfied. When the time came, she still wouldn't be able to leave. Therefore, from the beginning, the basic amount must be small. This way, it would not be difficult for her to increase it. Sure enough, the huge, foolish tiger once again drank the cup of celestial spirit water very blissfully. Then, it once again pretended to be pitiful as it looked at Su Luo. Su Luo spread out both hands. Don't have any more. A whoop, the huge, foolish tiger was unreconciled and once again rushed over to show Su Luo various kinds of enthusiasm. Su Luo helplessly closed her eyes and held her breath, suffering various kinds of ravages from it. If it demanded the water, and she give it, this certainly meant that she had a lot of celestial spirit water. Then today, she absolutely wouldn't be able to leave. Therefore, Su Luo decided not to indulge its little temper. As expected, no matter how enthusiastic it was, Su Luo merely frowned with her eyes closed and did not respond. After quite a while, the huge, foolish tiger finally released Su Luo. It walked to the side with a pitiful expression, squatted down in the corner, and occasionally would cast Su Luo a glance of feeling wronged. Nangong Luyun once again started on the job of washing her clean. He tidied up Su Luo until she was completely clean and neat. Then he finally sighed, saying, "Such a strong taste." Su Luo snorted twice. "Otherwise, how about switching to you instead?" Su Luo's brain conjured the image of Nangong Luyun being affectionately kissed by the huge, foolish tiger, and suddenly, she uttered a teethed, laughing sound. Seeing that amethyst crystal fish still being held in the huge, foolish tiger's paw, Su Luo thought about it. Then she took out a very small wooden bucket. She carried the wooden bucket to arrive in front of the huge, foolish tiger, indicating to exchange this bucket full of celestial spirit water for the amethyst crystal fish. The huge, foolish tiger looked at the amethyst crystal fish, and then looked again at the wooden bucket. It somewhat stupidly scratched its head, having a really hard time choosing. The two-faced, deceitful Su Luo was well-versed in the ways of haggling over price. She pulled at Nangong Luyun, pretending to walk away, and the huge, foolish tiger that had merely grown a large head was suddenly taken in by this deceit. It dashed towards her while roaring a woo-a-woo. It handed over the amethyst crystal fish to Su Luo, and with a huge claw, clasped the little wooden bucket to place it in front of Su Luo. A smiling expression of having prevailed flashed through Su Luo's eyes. With the raise of a hand, a stream of water shot out like an arrow. In a short time, it filled the little wooden bucket completely. Seeing the leaving backs of Su Luo and her people, the huge, foolish tiger somewhat stupidly scratched its head. Only after they left that section did Baichen Ing finally slowly exhale a breath of heavy air. He simply worshipped Su Luo to death, and with a pair of beautiful eyes that was as bright as the full moon, he looked at her. "Sister-in-law, this team is really no good without you. From now on, you should be our little number 5. Lan Xian immediately followed after with a more rowdy agreement. That's right, that's right. If it weren't for sister-in-law taking action today, we absolutely wouldn't be able to escape from within the palms of that huge, foolish tiger. Certainly, this is not the most important point. The key is that sister-in-law didn't even need to fight to cause the surrender of the opponent. 1. With the military force not even seeing blood. Not a single soldier was wasted in this final move. This was truly the greatest action in existence." Anya Ming enigmatically nodded his head. "I second that notion. 1. Didn't even need to fight to cause the surrender of the opponent. Is a strategy from the ancient Chinese text called The Art of War by Sun Wu, an ancient Chinese military strategist. If there is a better English translation for this strategy, please let me know. I loosely translated it almost word by word." Chapter 411, Secret Collection Room, 7. Nangong Luyun had one hand on Su Luo's shoulder. With an ingratiating smile that was devilishly charming, he raised an eyebrow. "No need to be that troublesome. Luo girl is already this king's people." Baichen Ing and them all curled their lips in disdain and turned their faces away. This guy was really shameless. Obviously he hadn't achieved it, yet he still said it. Sure enough, Su Luo crossly glared at him. "You can eat indiscriminately, but you shouldn't make irresponsible remarks." Nangong Luyun accused with a hidden bitterness. "You won't take responsibility." Su Luo held her hand to her forehead. Did this guy's head get screwed up again? Su Luo pushed him away. "Also, not looking at where we are at now. Always behaving in this indecent manner. After another few hours, the Amethyst Fish Palace will disappear. We had better increase our speed." If Su Luo hadn't mentioned it, then all's good. Once she mentioned it, everyone remembered the current situation. They still hadn't found the secret collection room. As a result, everyone increased their speed and walked onwards. Nangong Luyun, with a faintly complaining expression, tugged at the hem of Su Luo's clothing, like a young wife having been subjected to some grievance. He used that pair of accusing eyes to continuously stare at her. Su Luo walked in front, and Nangong Luyun merely pitifully tugged at her clothing. Now, the two of them seemed like Su Luo was the experienced cow walking ahead, while Nangong Luyun was the plow following behind the experienced cow. Su Luo walked, Nangong Luyun walked. Su Luo stopped, Nangong Luyun stopped. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed, speechlessly looking to the sky. She paused her footsteps to glare back at him. When Su Luo glared at him, his mood was still very good and his mouth split open into a smile towards her. That smile exposed his snow-white teeth and looked somewhat foolish. Su Luo did not feel like paying him any attention and turned around to walk off on her own. Once again, he reverted to his old ways, starting to accuse her with secret grudges and of having mistreated him as he glared at her. He held on to her clothing and followed behind, blindly and slavishly. Su Luo, with regards towards him, was simply speechless to the extreme. Could this man be any more childish? Even a 5-year-old child was more sensible than him, okay? He was insisting on having all of her attention on him before he was good, all right? Su Luo was completely defeated by him. It was useless to employ the hard stuff on him. It was simply like punching into cotton. He absolutely would pretend to be feeble for her to see. Therefore, Su Luo could only choose to use the soft method to deal with him. With no other way, Su Luo tore away from him who was holding on to her clothing. Her fine, pale, delicate hand then grabbed hold of his hand, and with large strides, walked forward. Nangong Luyun, this childish kid, was extremely happy. The corner of his mouth pointed up into an arc, and he was smiling from the corner of his eyes to the tip of his brow. He smiled until he appeared dim-witted. "What are you smiling about? Smile once more and I'll cut off your mouth." Su Luo harshly roared at him. This guy was used to getting a mile when he was given an inch. Give him sunlight, and he would glitter brilliantly. Give him a little color, and he would dare to open a dye workshop. Therefore, Su Luo definitely could not let him be so smug. Nangong Liuyun's mood was extremely good. With an air of complacency, he said, "It was you who took the initiative to hold this king's hand." Then, again, "So what?" Su Luo peevishly responded, "Since you already grabbed hold, then don't even think about letting go again. You must take responsibility till the end." Nangong Luyun arrogantly, and in a spoiled manner, lifted his chin, with a smug manner of having gotten away with a crafty scheme. Take responsibility for what? Take responsibility of you eating and pooping for a lifetime? Su Luo snorted twice. A lifetime? Good, then it's agreed upon like this. Nangong Luyun embraced Su Luo and left an imprint on her lips. Just like this, he passed judgment on her life and put the lid on the coffin. Nangong Luyun's speed was as fast as lightning. After he affixed the seal on her lips, Su Luo finally managed to react. Su Luo immediately became dumbfounded. She foolishly looked at Nangong Luyun. What did she say just now? Why was it that all of a sudden that was stamped and sealed? A little self-satisfaction flashed through the corner of Nangong Luyun's eyes. His gaze wandered without pause, looking around in all directions, only he wouldn't look at Su Luo. But he merely mouthed. Words that have been spoken and sealed with a mark on the lips is something you cannot renege on. Chapter 412, Secret Collection Room, 8. Su Luo immediately became depressed. "You cheated." Nangong Luyun declined to comment and then said while not allowing other opinions, "In any case, you cannot go back on your promise. Whoever backs out is a puppy." There really was this kind of tradition among the citizens of Eastern Ling Empire. By means of lips touching lips to seal the deal, the words spoken after would then take effect. Nangong Luyun bullied Su Luo just because her speed was not as fast as his. "I don't want to talk to you." Su Luo turned her face away while panting with rage. After turning her face away, she realized that her face was somewhat burning hot. Her heart jumped around like a little deer with beat-thump sounds, the circulation through her heart pulsing rapidly. Her body's instinctive reactions could very clearly explain a few questions. However, it was all deliberately overlooked by Su Luo. Behind them, Bai Qining, Lan Xian and Anya Ming, the three of them, exchanged meaningful glances. Nangong Liuyun's, this guy's, conduct once again rewrote a new page in their knowledge of him for so many years. Didn't expect it, really would never have imagined it. Normally, this guy had an appearance that was dignified, noble, aloof, and icily arrogant. They didn't expect that when he was wooing a miss he admired, he would actually be this kind of rogue. To cheat, fool, abduct, and swindle, these four methods, had he made preparations to use every one of the tricks? If other young ladies were aware that the male god in their hearts, with the kind of arrogance that came from being up high, His Highness Prince Jean, would have this kind of extremely childish appearance, perhaps the lightly affected young ladies would vomit blood, while the severe ones would faint. Even them who were his childhood friends would shudder 3 times upon seeing him like this. The three of them were in the midst of using their eyes to communicate and discuss this, when all of a sudden, they felt a burst of chilly wind blow towards them. Immediately, a kind of chill slowly rose up from the soles of their feet, following along the back, then scattering in all directions into the hundreds of bones in their 4 limbs. The three of them, with excellent nonverbal coordination, simultaneously turned their heads, just in time to meet Nangong Liuyun's pair of abstruse eyes that was giving off an eerily icy light. Cough, cough, cough. Bai Qining was the one who couldn't hold it in the most. With just one look from Nangong Liuyun, immediately he started to cough. "What are you guys doing?" Nangong Liuyun's voice was soft as clouds and gentle as the wind, but when the three of them heard it, was like the whistling frosty wind in a cold winter. "No, nothing. We are very busy, extremely busy." Lan Xian feigned an appearance full of innocence and continued to say very normally. "Looks like after we go back, I need to find a few magical beasts for you guys to play with so as to avoid you guys becoming as idle as old gossiping women." Nangong Liuyun faintly smiled as he looked at them. "I don't do it." Bai Qining was the first to return to his senses and gave a loud shout. Second older brother is the most handsome, confident and at ease, incomparable under the heavens, most distinguished, accomplished, so elegant that any flower would bloom when they see that second older brother. Beg you to let this go. Please don't get angry. I beseech you to pretend we don't exist. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo, only a ghost would want to fight with a magical beast. Nangong Liuyun was born with an abnormal disposition. With Bai Qinying's own 6th-rank strength, Nangong Liuyun definitely would find 2 6th-rank magical beasts to bring back. Afterwards, he would lock the three of them together. Boo-hoo, so dreadfully frightening. Su Luo, who was walking up ahead, heard sounds of activity and couldn't help but to turn her head around to ask in a mild tone, "What's going on?" Before Bai Qining could even ask for help, he was stared to a stop by Nangong Liuyun's seemingly mild gaze. He became directly unable to move. Nangong Liuyun hugged Su Luo's shoulders. His smile was eagerly attentive with a face and appearance full of fawning to curry favor from her. Bai Qining felt his strength was too lacking and decided to cultivate more properly, so as to avoid dragging you in next time. The matter before, he felt very ashamed. Su Luo nodded her head and tossed a smile towards Bai Qining. "This way is also good. Depending on a mountain, it could collapse. Leaning on a person, that person could run away. A person having their own strength is the most reliable." Bai Qinying's face had a bitter, long-suffering expression and wanted to complain, but Su Luo was already pulled away earlier by Nangong Liuyun, this bastard. Having a love in the opposite sex, they lose all humanity. He strongly wanted to demand equal treatment. Bai Qining wanted to shout, but didn't dare to. Chapter 413, Secret Collection Room, 9. As a result, the group of 3 with a bitter fate looked at each other in dismay. Each and every one of them had a forced expression full of suffering as they shuffled forward step by step. Beichening furthermore had a hidden grudge in his heart and could only sigh. Why didn't his mom give birth to him as a woman? The disparity in treatment was too severe. Along the way, they talked and smiled. It wasn't known how long they walked before the party of 5 finally arrived at the end of the road. Along this path, they really hadn't encountered another magical beast, not even a first-ranked one. It had been so safe they were close to being bored. A stone door was at the end of the road. 3 strikingly huge words were engraved on the stone door. Secret collection room. Finally, they had found the place. Everyone had a feeling that a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. However, they didn't know until later that this was merely the beginning. Having approached the stone door, Su Luo was astonished to discover that this really wasn't an ordinary stone door. Rather, it was made from a special material. It was white as suet white jade. The material was cold and stiff like frost. This door seemed to be emitting a faint cold air interwoven with some spirit force. If someone hit it with a fist, the force would be rebounded back by a transparent bright screen. There is a seal on the stone door, very unyielding. Nangong Luyun examined the door in about the time it would take a stick of incense to burn before arriving at a verdict. Then what should we do? Can it be undone? Su Luo asked with some concern. To make Nangong Luyun say these 2 words, very unyielding in assessment, it was clear that this seal was really hard to unravel. Nangong Luyun's smiling and ingratiating face had already become serious and imposing. He muttered to himself for quite a while and gradually said, "We'll try with all my effort." Su Luo, Beichening, and others moved back a few steps, leaving Nangong Luyun to stand alone in front of the stone door. Nangong Luyun's expression was focused and cold. His pair of eyes moved like electricity. They carefully paused often to examine the inscription on the stone door from up to down and left to right. His mouth seemed to be muttering and calculating something. The surroundings became very quiet. Time gradually passed bit by bit. It was even longer than the time it had taken to break the seal on the palace gate from before. Su Luo, Beichening, and the rest were all somewhat anxious. The Amethyst Fish Palace would not wait for anyone. After 24 hours, it would automatically disappear from the ocean's surface. At that time, if you were to be trapped in the stone rooms and couldn't get out, then don't even think about leaving the Amethyst Fish Palace in this lifetime. Su Luo did a quick calculation of the time. They already only had less than 2 hours remaining. Nangong Luyun stood there for a long time. Suddenly, an odd color flashed across his face. The plump lips on that perfect face pointed up slightly, as if his mood was pretty good. One could only see both of his hands in front of his chest knotted into a seal. Stream after stream of complicated imprints flew out from his hand and shot into the inscription on the stone door. Crackle SSSSS, a subtle sound came from the door. The imprints that Nangong Luyun had made seemed to have an extremely strong corrosive effect. The places where he had sent the imprint, the transparent protective layer there would immediately be corroded away. The imprint was like very small black tadpoles. It wasn't just 1 or 2, but rather a countless number of little black dots. Once it landed, the imprint would start to cover the surface, spreading in all directions. Very quickly, black specks had crawled all over the top of the bright white protective screen. The black specks spread continuously. It kept extending further until it had nearly climbed over the entire protective cover. Finally, that protective cover that had been changed to completely black sent out a violent burst of trembling. The protective cover started to disintegrate. The cracks became bigger and bigger, until finally one could only hear a crashing noise. That originally indestructible protective cover eventually exploded into fragmented pieces. Ultimately, it vanished into thin air. Su Luo finally let out the breath she was holding. Crash, after a period of some noise, those tightly closed hinged door panels slowly opened, with one going left and another going right. Just at this moment, all of a sudden from outside came the sounds of rushing footsteps. Su Luo turned her head back to look. Her expression immediately became somewhat complicated. Chapter 414, Secret Collection Room, 10. The people that came weren't strangers, they were the Crown Prince's group of people. Originally, this group of people was grandiose with many people. However now, when Su Luo swept them a glance, she discovered there were only a few people left. The rest of the people seemed to all have disappeared. Right now, the Crown Prince and his people were also extremely bedraggled. The Crown Prince had been blown asunder once by the fake amethyst crystal fish from before, so he was already very disheveled. But compared to the him right now, that before could only have been considered child's play. The Crown Prince was covered in blood from head to toe with bloodstains everywhere. Except for his pair of eyes, it was nearly impossible for others to recognize his true features. Liao Yin, who followed closely behind, wasn't any better off. One could only see the blood coagulated on his hair, making it knot up. The flowing blood on his face was mixed with sweat, giving off a faint stinky smell. There were traces that his right hand had been wrapped up before, and there were more blood stains on his clothes. He looked extremely unkempt and bedraggled. The Jade Lakes fairy was also no better off. She was accustomed to wearing a white dress of silk from head to toe, like an exceedingly refined fairy that was above the common people. Normally, she was always spotless, but now, her white silk dress was dyed full of bloodstains. On her matchless, beautiful, and exquisite face, there were marks of having been scratched by magical beasts. Su Luo was sizing them up, and they were also sizing up Su Luo. When compared to them, Bei Qining, the three of them, were simply too clean and way too neat. You guys, the Crown Prince stared with shock towards Bei Qining. How could you possibly arrive here alive? Bei Qining deliberately tried to anger the Crown Prince. With an appearance of all smiles and full of smugness. Oh, such a bedraggled Crown Prince must have experienced a fierce battle, right? How was it? Were the magical beasts very ferocious? The Crown Prince glared at him furiously. No better or worse, Bei Qining unhappily snorted. Who followed you to be no better or worse? We simply did not encounter even a little danger, whereas you guys, really cut a sorry figure. Talk big without writing a draft. The Crown Prince's foot shifted a few steps toward the stone door, while coldly snorting. Bei Qining complacently raised an eyebrow. Does it look like we had encountered any magical beasts? Also, why don't you see who is in our team? With Su Luo present, naturally everything was fine. All the dangers would stop to move aside, as if there was some kind of halo over her head. At the onset, the few of them also didn't believe in her. However, the things that happened afterwards kept proving to them to trust Su Luo in order to live forever. The Jade Lakes fairy interrupted in a cold voice. With third senior brother present, you guys were naturally able to avert disaster. If third senior brother was in our team, Bei Qining had a smile that was not quite a smile as he raised an eyebrow. He swept her a quick glance and lightly crooned, Yao Yao, younger sister, this time you certainly guessed wrongly. The Jade Lakes fairy sneeringly said, How could I have guessed wrong? If it was not third senior brother, then could it really be the Miss Su you guys keep saying? Stop telling jokes, it's not even a little bit funny. Bei Qining secretly said in his heart, Yao Yao, younger sister, this time you hit upon the truth. However, Nangong Luyun swept him a glance, then Bei Qining wasn't prepared to tell her the truth. He and Lan Xin them only laughed with hee sounds. They laughed until other people were upset from the bottom of their hearts. Just at this time, suddenly, a shadow rushed quickly towards the inside of the door. Immediately after was another shadow, then a third-person shadow. Damn sneaky. Nangong Liujue really knows how to pick up small advantages. Second older brother opened the sealed door with great difficulty, but let them take advantage of it. Lan Xin was infuriated to the point of starting to yell out loud. Then why are we still waiting? We should also go in without delay. Bei Qining, without saying anything further, hurried his footsteps to rush inside. After, Anya Ming also followed closely behind Bei Qining and rushed in. Only Su Luo and Nangong Luyun didn't move. Su Luo lifted her eyes to look over and clearly saw the corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth hook into an enigmatic curve. Chapter 415, Two-Faced Bamboo, 1. Su Luo curiously asked Nangong Luyun, "Why didn't you enter?" Making the wedding clothing for other people is not something a person of your character would do. With her understanding of Nangong Luyun, this guy was a master that would absolutely not let himself suffer the slightest loss. On Nangong Luyun's matchless handsome face stretched a smile brimming with an extremely sinister aura. "Wait a moment more, then in a little while, I'll take you to see a good play. I guarantee you will like it." Just a moment ago, when he was removing the seal, he sensed that something was amiss inside, so he was not in a hurry to enter. "Oh, don't tell me that inside. Alas, you let them charge in to break through enemy lines. You are really too two-faced." Su Luo accused him. Subsequently, she couldn't help but to start laughing. The pitiful crown prince, wherever you arrived at, you would always be falling for Nangong Liuyun's schemes. He thought he was benefiting at Nangong Liuyun's expense when he rushed in, but whether this advantage was all right to occupy, only knowing himself would he realize it. Having thought of things to this point, Su Luo couldn't help sympathizing somewhat with this person who suffered defeat at every battle, but kept on fighting despite the setbacks. This crown prince was incomparably tenacious. Like this for so many years, he struggled in the palm of Nangong Liuyun's hand and still had a healthy mind and body to live up until now. It was simply not easy for him. Just thinking about it, she pitied him. Nangong Luyun flicked her bright and clean forehead once with a humorous appearance and in a good mood. "Little girl is again silently cursing this king? How could that be?" Su Luo firmly denied. Her entire face had a proper righteous expression, and she said deadly earnestly, "I was only praising you in my heart. How could you slander me like this?" Nangong Luyun gently stroked her black hair with a cunning fox-like smile. "Praising this king should not be a humiliating thing. Saying it out loud will be fine. There is no need to keep it in your heart, right? Come, speak a few words for this king to listen to." Wherefore was Su Luo really praising him? If she were to say those unspoken criticisms of hers out loud, it would anger him until he walked away from the violent, explosive fury. Therefore, she simply smiled with a few hee-hee, ignoring his request, and furthermore, very cleverly changed the topic. "How long has it been already? Why is it that there isn't even a bit of the sound of activity inside? They could not truly have been completely wiped out, right?" Nangong Luyun raised the corner of his eyebrow and smiled. His eyes had a concentrated, pampering expression. He led Su Luo by the hands. "The time passed is more or less enough. Let's enter to watch the play." Su Luo followed Nangong Luyun to enter the jade door. A stone room that was not small appeared in front of her. Moreover, the surrounding space was extremely large. This place seemed like an independent palace. Rows and rows of stone rooms were lined up within it. At this moment, a small stone room appeared in front of them, with words "Secret Collection Room" written on it. The door was lightly closed. Just a push and it would open. The inside of the stone room was filled with a faint fog. The degree of visibility was quite low. Even if it was Su Luo, this kind of vision, when looking, she was only able to see the area within a range of 10 square meters in her surroundings. She only saw that the area inside the stone room had stacks of bookshelves made from pear tree wood against the wall. Books were placed in 2s and 3s on the bookshelves. On the books, stuck some more category entries, written with various titles. Apart from a stone desk in the middle of the stone chamber, it was completely empty. There was nothing else at all. Where are Beichin and them?" Su Luo expressed in a very baffled manner. Didn't everyone rush here because of the secret collection of books? Why was it that she couldn't see even their silhouettes in the secret collection room? A serious expression flashed across Nangong Liuyun's face, and a careless smile hung at the corner of his mouth. "Lift your head up to look." Su Luo followed Nangong Liuyun's words to look up and couldn't help crying out in surprise. Above the stone room hung sphere-like, transparent objects, one after another. Su Luo could clearly see that every globe contained a person. Chapter 416, Two-Faced Bamboo, 2, Beichening, Lanxian, on Yeming, the Crown Prince, Liaoyan, the Jade Lake's Fairy. There were no less than 10 spherical objects, and altogether they imprisoned more than 10 people. It seemed as if they were stuffed into a sack and hung high up in the air, being blown by the wind and thus swaying back and forth. It looked comical and also very distressing at the same time. The corner of Su Luo's mouth stiffened slightly. This, in the end, what had happened? Nangong Luyun smiled tenderly and in a bewitchingly charming manner. This is just the consequences of them fighting for and scrambling to come in first. The corner of Su Luo's mouth pursed a little and speechlessly took a glance at Nangong Luyun. In order to put on a play to act out the entire set, this black-hearted man went as far as not telling Beichen Ying's group about the trap mechanism inside. Alas, with this kind of friend, it was really their misfortune. Su Luo was able to see Beichen Ying. Naturally, Beichen Ying and them could also see Su Luo through the transparent sphere. Only, he was isolated from the world, and any sound he made couldn't be transmitted outside. Beichen Ying's eyes were gleaming with tears as he mournfully looked towards Su Luo, the two of them. His expression could be described as extremely pathetic and miserable. Now, Beichen Ying finally realized, when did Nangong ever eat a little loss from childhood to adulthood? How could he let the Crown Prince snatch away the fruits of toil that he had worked towards for a long time? Once he carefully thought about it, he knew that this bastard was certainly scheming something. Hatefully, they had been too concerned about the disorder and followed right behind the Crown Prince to rush into the stone room. And what was the result? The result was that not long after he stepped into the stone room, a mist suddenly welled up from the ground. Very quickly, the mist enveloped the stone room. At that time, they had only focused on seizing hold of some secret books and didn't pay mind to much else. Who would have thought that in the split second when they reached out to grab the secret books, all of a sudden, a huge, transparent bag with mouth spread open would appear underneath their feet and envelop their entire body. Afterwards, with a whoosh sound, when there wasn't even enough time for him to react, he was already tightly tied up in the bag and suspended in midair. The speed of this transparent bag was astonishing. There simply wasn't enough time for an ordinary person to react. They, as 6th rank in strength, in front of this transparent sphere, were just like weak infants, completely lacking the strength to resist. Now, Beichen Ying had both hands pasted to the transparent sphere, pitifully looking at Su Luo. This image was very similar to a convict locked in prison waiting for someone to visit him. He looked extremely pitiful. Seeing this scene, Su Luo very heartlessly covered her belly and burst into loud laughter. This kind of Beichen Ying was too cute, very adorable, too adorable. Nangong Liuyun's smile was gentle and alluring, as he raised an eyebrow and then asked her, "Are you satisfied with this show?" In order to obtain a smile from her, just a moment ago, when he removed the seal on the stone door, he deliberately activated the trap mechanism inside the stone room. The first batch of people that went in naturally would suffer a calamity. Su Luo, with both hands crossed behind her back, walked beneath them, laughing happily while watching these people constantly struggling within the transparent spheres. Suddenly, she was extremely happy, and having heard what was said, she hurriedly nodded, saying, "Yes, yes, very amusing." For just this scene alone, it was not a waste to come to the Amethyst Fish Palace today, haha. Especially for the Crown Prince, having been stared at by Su Luo as if observing an animal in the zoo, it made him extremely embarrassed. He continually struggled, wanting to jump out. However, the very regretful thing was that he didn't know what kind of material the transparent sphere was made from that when he was just about to stand up, he would slip back down again. He fell sprawled on his back. That appearance was especially hilarious. Su Luo covered her stomach and immediately started to laugh uproariously again. Very amusing. Simply too amusing. The Crown Prince was so infuriated that he started to curse out abuse in the transparent sphere, but not a thread of sound could be transmitted outside. One could only see his mouth constantly opening and closing, rapidly flipping up and down. Su Luo's gaze swept towards the Jade Lake's Fairy. Chapter 417, Two-Faced Bamboo, 3. She was somewhat curious. Under such hard-pressed circumstances, what kind of state would the Jade Lake's fairy be in? Would she be like a delicate white lotus flower, crying for help from Nangong Luyun? The Jade Lake's fairy's manner was a little beyond and contrary to Su Luo's expectations. One could see her sitting cross-legged, with eyes tightly closed, seemingly not caring a whit about the outside world, as if she was wholeheartedly immersed in the middle of cultivating. That appearance was indeed the same as an exceedingly refined fairy. Was the Jade Lake's fairy really this calm and stress-free, with a serene state of mind? Su Luo only watched her to see, and after a while, that pair of tightly closed eyes, sure enough, opened a thin crack. Su Luo saw this and smiled enigmatically. Be obedient, don't waste more time. Sort through these secret books carefully and pick a few. Nangong Luyun rubbed Su Luo's head in a pampering manner and reminded her with a smile. These words roused her from the daydream, and Su Luo hurriedly nodded her head. She could watch their good show at any time, but she had suffered untold hardships to arrive at the secret collection room. If she wasn't able to bring out even one secret book, then wouldn't that be a huge lose? Su Luo, with an extremely rapid speed, flashed to the edge of the wall. Her eyes were like electricity as they searched the wall. Su Luo's eyes brightened in a moment when she found a bookshelf with the space system carved on top. Methods for cultivating space system? There were actually space system secret cultivation books. This discovery immediately made Su Luo overjoyed beyond her expectations. It was known that the space system mage was extremely rare on this continent. The space system cultivation methods that were handed down was even more than a few. Even if it was Nangong Luyun who set out, it was also nearly impossible to find. Su Luo had the space element system, but besides using her space for storage, it practically had no other use. This was because she basically couldn't find any secret cultivation books for the space system, therefore she had no way to cultivate it. But now, such a great opportunity was laid out in front of her. The corner of Su Luo's mouth hooked into a self-satisfied smile. Just when Su Luo reached out her hand to grab that secret cultivation book, the people hanging in the air all stared fixedly at her. Just a moment ago, they were grabbing for the secret books when, without the least time to resist, they were suspended up. Now Su Luo was reaching for it. How could she escape this kind of fate? A taunting sneer hung at the corner of the Jade Lake's fairy's mouth. Now she was out of luck, but Su Luo would definitely accompany her in the same way of being out of luck. This way, the Jade Lake's fairy's heart would also be tranquil. On the contrary, Bei Qining had good intentions. He slapped the transparent sphere's surface nonstop, trying to warn Su Luo not to grab a secret book. Because if she grabbed the secret books, she would be suspended in the air like them. Also, once she was suspended up, there was simply no way to escape again. Bei Qining himself was very worried, whether he would disappear with the amethyst fish place to vanish forever. Therefore, he did not wish for Su Luo to brave this danger. In fact, how could this simple child know? Nangong, since a long time ago, had already considered all of them to be used as experiment samples. Just when he was slapping the wall of the transparent sphere nonstop, Su Luo's finger had already made contact with that book of space cultivation techniques. The thing that made everyone gobsmacked was that Su Luo could actually take out that secret book. Furthermore, underneath her feet, unexpectedly, nothing appeared to shoot out. The surroundings was an area of silence. There weren't any anomalies. Suddenly, the Crown Prince was stupefied. Bei Qining was struck dumb. The Jade Lake's fairy nearly went insane. Simply too unfathomable. Obviously, everyone that touched the secret books, afterwards, they would be punished by being hung up. Why was it just her that wasn't needed to be punished? In the end, what was going on? Who could tell them in the end what was going on? Why would there be this kind of difference in treatment? Could it be that Su Luo really was the illegitimate daughter of the goddess of fortune, so her luck was especially super good? Chapter 418, Two-Faced Bamboo. 4. Jade Lake's fairy's eyes were opened wide, unwaveringly staring at Su Luo. In that pair of beautiful eyes flashed an endless sinister radiance. Both of her hands were clenched so tightly that her sharp nails dug deeply into her flesh. Su Luo took space cultivation technique, not bothering to look through it. She just conveniently put it inside her sleeves. In fact, she had placed it inside her space. Demonical wind technique, 10,000 glaciers, weaving inferno. If these secret books were taken outside, each book could stir up all the experts to fight and plunder it. But in here, they were like the most ordinary books, freely tossed in the corner of the bookshelf. Because each person was limited to take at most 7 books, therefore, Su Luo had some difficulty in choosing. When she couldn't decide, she would ask Nangong Luyun. The latter would always give her the best answer. Those persons that were suspended in the air watched Su Luo choose the secret books beneath them in a lively manner with a leisurely attitude, as if strolling around a vegetable market. All of their eyes were filled with admiration, jealousy, and hate. They wished and fantasized that the person taking the secret books were themselves. Normally, if these secret books appeared in the world, it would create a sensation. Yet, at the moment, they seemed to be the cheapest goods from a street stall, casually being cleaned out. This girl picking secret books should just pick at them. She was also luxuriously taking one then discarding it. Discarding a book, then just discard one book. However, those secret books that were tossed to the ground very quickly would change into light smoke, fading away in the room. It all unexpectedly disappeared immediately. The people hanging overhead were so jealous that blood almost dripped from their eyes. They were itching to pounce on Su Luo and directly strangle her to death. Those were secret books. Secret books. Taking it outside, even the worst secret book could be auctioned for a price of 500,000 gold coins or more. This loathsome girl was extravagantly tossed it to the ground in passing. Their hearts were practically weeping blood. In fact, Su Luo was also helpless. She did have space. No matter how many secret books there were, she could take it all with her. Although this was so, she also didn't know where this immortal entity was from, to actually stipulate that a person could only take away 7 secret books at most. How would she know? This matter was very simple. When she was taking the 8th secret book, a ding-dong sound rang in her head, as if reminding her of this stipulation. Therefore, Su Luo had no alternative but to pick and choose some. She took out the secret books she swept in her space from before and discarded them. She could only choose more carefully for those with the highest value and the most useful. Now, the crown prince was so jealous that his eyes seemed to practically be releasing 2 flames. Afterwards, it ignited into a raging flame. He unceasingly pounded on the transparent sphere, but no matter how hard he tried, the transparent sphere just wouldn't move a single jot. Bai Qinying's heart at the moment was going ba-thump, palpitating non-stop. He stared at Su Luo very tensely and wanted to tell her in a very loud voice that he wanted the water and wind system books. He also was not seeking a lot. He merely beseeched sister-in-law not to forget him and incidentally pick one up for him. Suddenly, the space between his eyebrows creased slightly, and he cried out in alarm. Not good. At this moment, Su Luo also discovered that something was wrong, and she looked up. Unexpectedly, she found that the first bookshelf and the secret books on it by the wall were enveloped by a thick fog. When the thick fog dispersed, that bookshelf had actually disappeared without reason before everyone's eyes. Soon after, it was the second bookshelf, and the third bookshelf. The secret collections are starting to disappear. Everyone, without exception, became aware of this point. Therefore, the people hanging in midair become even more anxious, so anxious that their brows were beaded with sweat. If the secret collection was to disappear, wouldn't it mean that they didn't obtain anything? Each and every one of them was very anxious and started to hit and kick the transparent sphere. The transparent sphere, however, was just like a ball of cotton, super soft and kept on trapping you, not allowing you to go out. Su Luo accelerated the movement of her hands. She had already taken 6 books, She still had the qualifications for a final book. All of a sudden, she discovered that her foot had kicked something. She couldn't help but to lower her eyes to look. Chapter 419. A Narrow Escape. 1. Eh? What is this thing? Su Luo crouched down in curiosity and carefully looked at that fiery red-colored stone. All of a sudden, she felt her head start to spin with dizziness, as if she was in a trance. Su Luo abruptly returned to her senses, and with lingering fear, she stared at that piece of fiery red-colored stone. Something odd was absolutely inside this stone. Just a moment ago, she had been staring for too long and actually felt that her soul seemed to have been sucked in. It was as if her entire consciousness was about to be controlled, simply giving birth to a restrained fear in her heart. Su Luo reached out with her hand to pick up this fiery, red-colored stone. Even though something odd was inside the stone, however, it really had a mysterious power. She had an indistinct feeling that this stone would be a stroke of luck for her. Quickly collect them, there is no time. Nangong Luyun, seeing Su Luo crouched on the ground staring off into space, he couldn't help but to utter a reminder. Oh, oh, oh. With this, Su Luo finally returned to her senses. In passing, she conveniently put away that fiery red-colored stone into her space. She planned to leave it for later to carefully examine it again. Presently, the most important thing was to choose secret books. Yet, when Su Luo's gaze once more looked towards the bookshelves on the wall, she discovered that more than half of the bookshelves had already disappeared. She only had the time to randomly pull out one last book before the bookshelf completely disappeared in front of her. What made people even more dumbfounded was that along with the vanishing bookshelves, the fog in the stone room also started to dissipate. It retreated until the room's radiance was finally restored. The layer of the transparent sphere that trapped everyone became thinner and thinner, more and more transparent. Finally, with a feeble soft noise, the transparent ball split open. Li Outyin was the first to jump out. The moment his body was out, with a pounce, he flew to the last remaining bookshelf. The bookshelf on that wall had already faded away until the very last layer. Almost in a blink of an eye, it would disappear. Just when Li Outyin reached out with his hand, the bookshelf very naughtily disappeared completely and cleanly. The surrounding walls were all restored back to the snow-white walls. Li Outyin looked at his pair of hands that was completely empty. Immediately, he was furious until his veins burst and sent a heavy fist smashing towards the wall. It was unknown what material the walls in the stone room were made from. It was simply too hard. Li Outyin's fist smashed down. Immediately, his hand was drenched with blood and swelled up greatly, but the wall did not change a bit. Li Outyin was simply nearly insane from fury. That pair of eyes was bloodshot and full of anger. He glared towards Su Luo with a murderous expression. Why would this loathsome girl have such good luck? Yet he couldn't find even a single secret book. Now, Beichening also came out, having already struggled free. He was like a flowery butterfly gracefully flying towards Su Luo, with a pair of eyes looking at Su Luo anxiously. Both of his hands were tugging at her sleeves, with pleading tones of a spoiled child. He said, "Sister-in-law, sister-in-law," that wishful tone with a still hesitant little appearance, that little expression of acting like a pleading, spoiled child. Even with her eyes closed, she would know the meaning he was conveying. The grand and stately venerable president of the mercenary union, could he not be this embarrassing? Su Luo helplessly held up her forehead, and passing, tossed him a secret book she had picked up. Beichening caught it and took a look. Immediately, he became extremely happy. "Sister-in-law, I love you to death." Sister-in-law really actually selected a secret book that was suited for him. She picked it. Boo-hoo, very happy. So happy that he seemed to think of giving his heart to her. What's to be done? Would Nangong Luyun get mad? Bai Qinying furtively cast a glance at Nangong. Nangong Liuyun's sharp eyebrows wrinkled slightly. He directly reached out an arm to lift up Bai Qinying and cast him aside in passing, like throwing a rag. However, now it was a fact that Bai Qinying having gotten a secret book. This time, Lan Xin and Anya Ming's hearts were no longer calm. Chapter 420, A Narrow Escape, 2. Everyone was childhood friends together. Why would sister-in-law only give one to Little Shadow and not them? It was difficult for them to approach Su Luo, so they could only watch Su Luo from a distance. On that peerlessly handsome faces was a pair of deep eyes with a pitiful expression, waiting anxiously. Those eyes cast Su Luo a gaze, as if complaining of a secret grudge. Clearly, it was accusing her of being unfair. At the same time, it was strongly asking for her to give equal treatment. Su Luo couldn't help but to hold her forehead. What are these people, ah? Why was it that each and every one of them wouldn't learn what's proper, but instead followed Nangong Luyun in being childish? She wasn't an old nanny that took care of them, okay? Su Luo put one hand on her waist, while she helplessly beckoned them over with the other hand. Consequently, the two young masters from influential aristocratic families, with faces raised in expectation and jolting buttocks, rapidly ran over to her. At this time, they didn't pay any damn attention to Nangong Luyun. Su Luo took 2 secret books from her space and handed one to each of them. Here you go, Little Lan's wind system, Little Ming's water system. Both of you put it away carefully. Don't say I am partial. Oh. Earlier, when she was picking secret books, she had already thought that she must prepare books for them. Yes, yes. The 2 young masters from influential families nodded their heads hastily. In a kissing up to her manner, they rushed over. One of them fanned Su Luo, and the other poured water for her to drink. How could Nangong Luyun tolerate these 2 getting close to Luo girl who belonged under his name? He placed his hands behind his back and stood up. His eyes were like frost as he glared at them. Following that, the 2 of them quickly fled in disarray. At once, they voluntarily got lost and arrived at Bai Qinying's side. As a result, the 3 good brothers each had a secret book that was suited to them in hand. They stood together in a circle and whispered, so happy that the corner of their mouths were pointed up high. Seeing this, those people that were similarly hung up but did not receive a secret book were so envious to the point of almost going insane. Su Luo saw their satisfied expressions, and her heart was also somewhat content. Before, when she was selecting the secret books, these guys' eyes were like searchlights, as if practically stuck to her body. Even if she didn't want to take one for them, they made her feel that she had to. As for Nangong Luyun, Su Luo scratched her hair with some doubt. Before, she was occupied with selecting secret books, so she wasn't paying attention to Nangong Luyun. She faintly glanced at him from the corner of her eyes and seemed to have seen him not selecting any secret books. Just when Su Luo was about to ask, the crown prince up ahead brought his henchmen and aggressively walked towards them. The crown prince's pair of ice-cold eyes stared rigidly at Su Luo, simply wishing he could dismember Su Luo's body into tens of thousands of segments. He hated her so much. He practically hated everything to an unprecedented extent. Originally, everything was well, but ever since this loathsome girl appeared, afterwards, his fortunes started to decline. If those matters were counted one by one, each of them were tears of blood accounts that he could not bear to recollect. In the beginning, being duped into a fishing competition where he lost 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. Afterwards, he was schemed by Nangong Luyun and was defrauded another 1,500 green-colored crystal stones. In addition, the amethyst crystal fish he obtained after strenuous effort and with great difficulty, then actually exploded. If it exploded, then just explode, but it actually caused him to be injured. Su Luo's team had actually walked into the safe passageway by luck. They were unimpeded throughout the entire way to reach the secret collection room while his own team experienced a narrow escape. Finally, Most of those experts he brought along had been nearly wiped out. The matter that made the crown prince most furious until he nearly collapsed was he had entered the secret collection room with great difficulty. Yet the people on his side were all hung up in midair. Yes, hung up. Suspended high up in the sky. Afterwards, he could only look on helplessly as that loathsome girl picked secret books. If she was properly picking the books, then forget it, but she would pick one and toss one aside. Just that wastefulness and such extravagance, simply making him want to choke her to death from watching. With great difficulty, he had gotten out, but all the secret books inside the stone room, without exception, had all disappeared. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.